Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Planning and Development Council in the town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have regrets from anyone for this evening?
We have regrets this evening from Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Council, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. Committee of the, Councillor Hutchins?
I want to declare pecuniary interest in the matter of the Council's consideration of the licensing for rental housing on an item 10 on November the 14th Council agenda. It was with the ASC committee, and I do operate an apartment unit.
Thank you, Councillor. Council, it's time to resolve into committee of the whole. We need two of you to do that. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Duddick, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any. And we are resolved now into committee of the whole. And the first two items before us are the consent agenda. Is there any interest in separating anything, or can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Councillor Lischina, all in favor? And the consent agenda is consented.
Just one item. On item number 2, I wonder if we could put the ward, I don't think it's Ward 4. I know Ward 4's got an awful lot of the town, but I don't think we go east of Niagawa.
We will rely on the clerk to use her correcting bylaw to fix that for you, Councillor. Thank you. All right, there are no confidential consent items. That brings us to our first public hearing item, and that would be the public meeting report for the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision, Sabrina Homes, Burl Oak Acquisitions, at 181 Burl Oak Drive. This is the east side of Burl Oak Drive, north of Stevenson Road, and this is an information meeting rather than a decision meeting for this item. And if we give our attention to Rob Thun, he will summarize the file you guys have read on council and that the public is curious to know what we're talking about. Mr. Thun.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. As the Mayor has mentioned, this is a statutory public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment and a draft plan of subdivision application submitted by Sabrina Homes to rezone 181 Burl Oak Drive and to create a 4-lot residential draft plan of subdivision. Your report can be found on page 85 of tonight's agenda. Purpose of tonight's meeting is to obtain public input related to the application. Staff will return in the future with a recommendation following the comprehensive review of the application. For everybody's information, the air photo identifies the application area. It's highlighted, it's bolded out, and its context with the surrounding area. The existing property does contain a single detached home with access onto Burl Oak Drive. The surrounding properties, as you can see from the air photo, all contain single detached homes. From the official plan perspective, livable Oakville, the site is designated low-density residential. Detached dwellings are permitted with a maximum density of 29 units per site hectare. The slide before you shows the existing and the proposed zoning. So from a zoning perspective, the property under consideration is zoned RL3, and a very, very small portion down in this area is RL5. The applicant is seeking a site-specific amendment to permit that creation I mentioned of 4 lots with an RL5 zoning with one special provision. That special provision relates to the units or the lots on Burl Oak Drive having a frontage of 13.2 versus the 15 within an RL5 zoning category. Access to those lots will be from Burl Oak Drive, and the one in the rear would be from Wilmot Crescent. They are not seeking any other zoning relief. For the information of council and the members of the public, this is the chart from the zoning bylaw which outlines the RL3 and the RL5 zoning regulations. As you can see from the chart, the only difference between an RL3 and an RL5 is the lot area and the lot frontage. The various other regulations, front yard, flankage yards, interior side yards, and so on, are all the same. Before council now is the draft plan of subdivision. As I mentioned, it is 4 lots. There would be 1 larger lot on Wilmot Crescent with 3 smaller lots on Burl Oak Drive with a frontage of 13.2 meters in width. Depths of the lots on Burl Oak would be 40 meters deep, which is approximately 130 feet. A public information meeting was held on May 9th, 2017. There were 10 members of the public that did show up. There was a good conversation with regards to the proposal between the applicant and staff. The comments raised at that meeting and from tonight's meeting, or from that meeting I should say, are documented within today's report. Comments from tonight's meeting will also be taken into consideration as part of the recommendation report in the future. So in conclusion, Your Worship and members of council, staff are putting forth the following recommendation for council's consideration. And once again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear any further public input. We will return in the fall with a recommendation. Thank you, Your Worship and members of council.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. We have a number of delegations from people interested to share information with council. And we appear to have a question from Councillor Robinson.
Your Worship, I just need to, I feel the need to explain something. The residents in that particular location sent me this petition and the attached letter, and they said they wanted it delivered to the councillors before tonight's meeting. That didn't, it appears that that didn't happen. I think it just got on everybody's desk tonight, so I just want to make sure they understand that it's still here and it'll still be read, but they didn't quite get it out to the councillors as soon as they expected.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. So at the risk of repeating something everybody already understood, we're not making a decision tonight, so all input, no matter how late it was delivered to the desk today, will be considered in plenty of time for the decision meeting, which will be in all likelihood months from now. Councillor O'Meara?
Yes, Your Worship, I have some questions of staff. Should you want to wait till after the delegation or prior?
It's your pleasure.
Okay. Thank you very much then. Actually, I have some questions, Mr. Thun, with regards to, first of all, I'm wondering if you can just define neighborhood. It's explained in section 11.1.9 for evaluating development applications, and a few of these talk about existing neighborhood character, surrounding neighborhood. This particular property is sort of buttressed on a couple different neighborhoods. So I'm wondering if you might be able to explain to me exactly what we're going to define as the neighborhood, whether it's the Samuel Curtis Estates, whether it's the new townhouses just north on Burl Oak, whether it's the existing homes to the south. It seems like it could go a few ways. So I'm wondering if you might be able to shed some light in terms of what we mean by neighborhood when we look at how the development application is going to be evaluated.
Through Your Worship to the councillor, the neighborhood review will take place as part of the technical review. We do have the Samuel Curtis Estate, we do have the lots to the north, and we also have the Burlington lots across the street. So those are all considered into the neighborhood character. You do have single detached homes, you do have lot sizes, you do have frontages, and the part of the 1119 are compatibility. Those are criteria in 1119 to determine if it's compatible with the neighborhood. So that is part of the technical review that will occur following tonight's meeting and before the recommendation.
Okay, perfect. And I didn't happen to see the width of the fourth property that will front onto Wilmot. I know the mouth part, it says 15.8, but how wide is that back property?
Are you...
See where the existing story is? What's the width across?
This here?
Yeah.
It's in the order of 30 meters.
30 meters. So then, going forward, let's just say this gets approved. Are there any rules or regulations in terms of that in the future being severed again, that property?
The whole purpose of the application is not to sever the property. Once the zoning comes into play, there's a 2-year requirement that no variances, no zoning amendments can occur. It's my understanding through the applicant is not proposing to divide that lot up further. There will be a house on there that will basically preclude the severance of the lot.
Okay, thank you. And then just my last question briefly is that the townhouses to the north on Burl Oak, on the other side, the newer ones, do you know what, I think those are RL5 as well, but do we know what the lot width is of those townhomes? Yeah, just the
These ones here?
RL5s up there, yeah.
Those are single detached homes.
Yeah, sorry, do we know what the lot width is for those?
They're in the order of, I think they're around 15 to 16 meters wide.
15 or 16 meters, okay. Thank you very much, thank you, Your Worship.
Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
The first delegation speaking to this item is Leslie Drew.
Welcome, Ms. Drew. Council looks forward to your information,
Okay, do I need to speak into the mic?
if you want them to hear it.
Okay, is that better? Okay. I think I could be heard without the mic, but we'll use the mic for tonight. Just one thing I did want to mention, I was looking briefly at the report when I arrived this evening. Appendix A, page 95, has public comments. My husband and I did submit some public comments, and we had received acknowledgement, but they're not here. They're not included in the report. So I'll just briefly summarize what was in that document. Our concern is safety. If we look at the map ahead of us on Wilmot Crescent, you'll see there's a sharp bend in the road just by where the property fronts on Wilmot. And I believe on the second property to the right of the proposed severed lot is a school bus stop. And I think it's a school bus stop for more than one school. Certainly it's an elementary school bus stop, and if there's construction trucks and construction vehicles on the road, it's going to be a safety hazard in my concern. So one of our requests was, where at all possible, for all construction vehicles to approach this lot from Burl Oak. The other thing that happens, the second point that we raised in our submission, was the fact that there are a number of construction vehicles in the area on a day-to-day basis and landscape trucks. That's normal and we accept that. But they tend to park and line up on the flat part of Wilmot Crescent, just going south. If there's a vehicle on either side of the road, it becomes a blind corner. No one can see going around that corner. So when you have a school bus stop, you have traffic that can't see clearly, and you have landscape vehicles and you have construction vehicles. It's a real safety concern to us. I did take some pictures the other day of this exact situation. I haven't submitted them, but I do have them on my iPad. Should I submit them after this meeting or keep them available for viewing? It does show the congestion as the traffic's trying to go around the corner.
Well, first, we're happy to receive your information whenever you want.
Okay.
And this isn't the end of it either. You can send stuff in after tonight. Second, we do have your submission here.
Good. I just didn't see it in here.
We've got her for you.
Thank you.
And third, can I ask, not everybody's aware that in Oakville, for generations and generations, we do enforcement on request. We don't have a fleet of we don't have a posse of deputy sheriffs running around looking for infractions. We count on you to phone us.
I've done that. I've actually done that. I've actually requested that council restrict parking to one side of the road. And they did a survey of everyone on the street, and there was not consensus, and it was not put through.
But should we be sending enforcement more often?
I've called about that, too.
All right.
I was told that they probably wouldn't get there in time, so could I please take a photograph? I did. The gentleman saw me take a photograph. A few days later, my phone line was cut. And so nothing was done. So I will continue to call.
Well, you've awakened a concern here that something's going on that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
So
we just don't want it to be compounded by the construction vehicle.
I hear you. I totally understand
Yeah.
and sympathize. So I'll follow up with you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation speaking to this item is Averill Creek.
Here she is. Welcome, Ms. Creek. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. I'm 3549 Wilmot, and my husband and I have been in the area, well, we're the first owners of the home that we live in. And one of the reasons we chose this particular area, this particular lot, was because of the short frontage on our side, was the fact that we were under the impression that a maximum of 3 homes would be placed next to our adjacent to our land. So that is we felt that that would be, for as long as we would be there, that would be the case, and now we're seeing that there's at least 4. The other concern, like Mrs. Drew, is the congestion and so on the street. So brief, but that is our concern.
Can I just ask you a brief question? Are you the lot, looking at the picture on the screen, are you the lot below the RL5 block?
No, the other side, sir.
You're the one to the right of the RL5 block?
Yes, no, yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct, that thing was moving around, yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate the help. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation speaking to this item is Robert Cincinnati.
Good evening, sir. Council looks forward to your information. And I hope you forgive me for ducking pronouncing your name.
My address is 3543 Wilmot Crescent. I'm here representing, I guess, the rest of the people on Wilmot and Burl Oak. A lot of the main concerns were that this oversized lot in the future would be subdivided and then causing, again, with the traffic and how tight that entrance is for that lot. The developer did mention that it wasn't his plans, but could not guarantee it. So that kind of worried us, and the fact that they can't guarantee kind of brought open eyes to the area. I believe if you can put an amendment to make smaller lot frontages on Burl Oak, you can also maybe put an amendment on the oversized lot that cannot be subdivided. I don't know. I've never done this before. So I guess that's the only reason why we're here. I'm here speaking is for the majority of the group that are concerned about that.
So thank you very much. As I understand it, you're concerned that there remains a level of uncertainty about the future of that particular large
Correct.
lot, and you'd like certainty about it.
Correct.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Our next listed delegation is Tom Jakomek.
Good evening, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening. I live adjacent to this property at 3545 Wilmot, and I had bought from these original people where this property is. And this property has always had a water problem. And it all started after Metris was playing around, and those lots are all big, and all the water was going one way, as Ralph Robinson knows. And over the years that people we've been trying to fight it, but nobody seemed to really want to step up. So I really have to thank Mr. Darnell, Lambert, and the builder's developer engineer, both of them. They finally come to an agreement. They came down a few weeks ago, and they agree that it needs a catch basin on that property, which they agreed on, because there's so much water there and it can't get away, and with all the mosquitoes coming now. Last year, you could have put the tugboat ending in that property. It was so bad because they're all sloping down. You know, the slough was not the answer. It was just those properties are all too big. And my other concern is that, just as you were saying about that lot beside us on Wilmot, like by pushing those 3 houses out, it's going to make that lot, as you can see, it's quite big. And we're all concerned. We don't want a 5th house in there. And really, that frontage isn't isn't wide enough anyway, but who says down the road they could go in like this? You know, I mean, anything's possible. Like you said, 2 years down the road, he sells this, somebody else is here and arguing for, so I kind of agree with my neighbor Robert there. If they can put an amendment on there, it's one house and just one house. Because really all that property was only supposed to really have 3 houses. We have the plan somewhere. I know it was somewhere when we bought that property. It was all zoned because she went through to break up a few lots there, right? On there.
Okay.
But that property was so wet. 2 years ago in the storm, that farmhouse got washed out. She got $80,000 from the insurance company. That's why she left Dodge, and they sold sooner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've not only brought welcome news about how effective Darnell Lambert can be, you've also proved once again that we really are a city that calls itself a town and gossips like a village. Do we have more delegations, Madam Clerk? One more.
The next delegation is Eric Mertson.
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. I'm actually the agent here on behalf of the developers. I'm just here to answer any questions, so I had just put my name down on the form there.
All right. Did you hear anything that you wanted to add information to?
While I'm up here, yes, I could add a few things just to address some of the items that the public had mentioned. Well, with regards to the last one, as you know, our engineer did go out there and address the issues with the drainage. And we are proposing to have a catch basin installed in the back of the larger lot there to mitigate those issues. With regards to the construction access, that will be coming off of Burl Oak, so it will not cause any further congestion off of Wilmot, and that will obviously be temporary as well. And I think with regards to subdividing or further severing the larger lot, it's kind of difficult to tell on this map here, but the existing driveway, the proposed driveway, is in fact a little too narrow to create two driveways for a second house. And in addition to that, we have to provide, I guess, the catch basin on the property. The house will be oriented a certain way where subdividing or severing the lot will not occur.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Councillor, oh wait, don't run away. Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, thank you very much. So I kind of heard a bunch of, reasons why it doesn't make sense to sever that lot, but I didn't hear you actually say you have no intention to sever that lot.
We do not have any intention to sever that lot.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Robinson.
Worship, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but my question is of Mr. Lambert, if I can have that opportunity at some time.
Why don't I come to you as soon as I thank our delegate for his information?
Oh, fine, thanks.
Thank you for your information, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Oh. Darnell, you've heard about the water. You're familiar with the history of the water. We all are, many of us are. What do you think you're going to be able to do this time to prevent it from occurring as it did the last time?
Through you, your worship. A catch basin in that corner right now, that is the low spot in that property. And my look at it is 181 Burl Oak, which is the property that's going through the redevelopment phase at the moment, will rely on that basin. The long property that feeds off of Burl Oak Drive naturally drains to the back to that, in fact, low point. And Tom Jakovic's property, in fact, partially drains onto that corner as well. As far as in the future, of course, we'll have a basin there that will provide an outlet. There'll also be an easement over the top of that basin, which will allow the town to go in to ensure that that basin would be always open and functional.
And that will prohibit occurrence of what we experienced a few years ago.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, just to follow up with Mr. Lambert as well. So I know on many of our infill development sites, they don't go through site plan, but this this plan would go through a site plan, would it not?
This is going through a subdivision at moment, and I believe so in the creation of the lots, each of the lots would then subsequently, no? So it'll be just going through a plan of subdivision. So the warning clauses that would go to the lots will be formalized through the plan of subdivision process.
So would the residents in the area have the same protections that a site plan application would have by going through the subdivision route rather than through site plan?
The lot that's going through the development process will have the clauses burdened upon the lands. So the adjoining lots won't have those. They have a natural swale that's on their land now, which they will want to maintain in order to drain to this catch basin.
I understand the desire that they would want to maintain that, but as you and I both know, when they get in there and landscape looks better than worrying about drainage, site plan seems to give some comfort to adjacent neighbors in terms of ensuring that grading happens accordingly and that it's not overlooked as soon as the town gives its thumbs up to. So how would we ensure that the properties adjacent, especially to the south, not just when it's finished, but moving on in the future, are protected against any water issues moving forward?
So through your worship, I'm assuming we are talking about the long property that feeds off of Burl Oak and Mr. Jakovic's property.
Yes.
Those would be the two properties that would then be receiving a benefit of the basin that's there in place. Of course, you went directly to the issue of what if a homeowner just chooses to do something upon their property and create their own issue of drainage. The one thing I always look for is a relief point to put that drainage back to, and this basin will go a long way to solving that problem. It's not to say that an owner wouldn't do something upon their specific lands and frustrate their own drainage, but lots of times we're looking for a relief point for that drainage to go. This basin gives us that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Mr. Lambert, do you want to just double back to your explanation and explain about why an easement is your preferred tool here?
So through your worship, the easement is a preferred tool here because there is infrastructure that feeds into the back of the lot, a pipe and a basin that we wish to ensure is maintained and is functional for those lots that rely upon it.
What the councillor and the public would like to hear is that an easement is a legal right held by the town to go in and fix things if we need to.
I would concur with that statement.
Thank you. It's a little service I offer, reducing things into plain language. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a question for staff. If we go with this plan, the draft plan, the 3 and the big one, could you comment on the footprint? Would you expect that you can have a monster home on that big one and then smaller size homes compared to the ones that would be in the neighborhood? Hence, it doesn't actually concur with what the neighborhood is now?
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, the RL3 and the RL5 as they stand right now, which they are not proposing to change, the lot coverage is 35%. So they can cover, under the existing zoning bylaw, 35% of the land with a building.
Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this file? Yes, sir. Would you like to come down and introduce yourself and share your information?
To your council, I'm part of the owners with Sabrina Homes. Just wanted to give a confirmation that we have no intent whatsoever to sever the bigger lot to make into 2 pieces of land. And I will consider all the traffic issues along with the catch basin that we have come across a conclusion with the engineering today.
Thank you for your information.
Thank you.
Sir, the clerk would like to know your name.
Bilal, B-I-L-A-L. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your information. Mr. Thun, I just have one question on this matter, which I hope you can, as you work on the file, you can give some consideration to. it would seem to me that a bare application of the 35% coverage to an extra large lot might lead to a home that wouldn't be in the character of the existing neighborhood, might be 2 or 3 times bigger. And I mean, I'm just doing math on top of my head. And I'm hoping that in your recommendation report, you'll discuss the applicability of Section 11 and neighborhood compatibility.
Absolutely, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. With that, we need a motion to receive all the information. Councilor O'Meara, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is adopted. And that brings us to our next statutory public meeting report, the town-initiated official plan amendments and urban structure review. And here, we are looking at receiving comments from the public, and so once again, it's not a decision item, it's an information item. And if you give your attention to Mr. Bigger, he will summarize for the public what you poured over, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of Council. Good evening. This is item number 4, and as mentioned, it's a public hearing on the urban structure review and the results of that study as we bring forward draft official plan amendments for public comment, public input tonight. And essentially the result of those amendments is to implement a new urban structure townwide for the town of Oakville. A little bit on the points that we're going to aim to cover here. We have been quite active lately in the community with this our version of this presentation, various meetings. We're just going to do a quick review of the study for those that are just joining us, a little bit on the findings of that review, the urban structure review, some brief notes about the policy directions and the draft amendments, and then just a quick look to the future for this study. Just generally, one way we like to think of urban structure and its importance, it's essentially the pattern of built and unbuilt areas in a community or in a town. It's important because it sets out where we live, work, and play, and is a key determinant of livability and sustainability. It's also important to have an urban structure. It helps to determine the location, timing, and the capacity of infrastructure to support development. And similarly, a comprehensive urban structure helps to provide the direction for the development of community infrastructure over time. So that's making sure we have all those elements in the right place at the right time to have a complete community. Some news lately, for those of you just joining us on the notion of growth and growth management, we have an updated growth plan just released recently, and we also are in the midst of a comprehensive official plan review here at the town of Oakville. And so the notion of conformity and consistency with those provincial plans and with provincial policy statements is very much an important part of our official plan review, and it's helping understand where and how we will accommodate required growth over time. So a number we use here in Halton, a million residents by 2041 are forecast to come here, and a portion of that growth will be coming to Oakville. So this is a big job for the urban structure review, is to look at where that can be accommodated. So this is just building on that idea of importance of an urban structure for Oakville. Since all our lands are either developed or planned to be developed, and we're not adding additional lands to our municipal area, our municipal boundary, we're looking at how to accommodate required growth within the built environment. So instead of developing outwards, we're looking at the best approach for working within our existing boundaries. So when we started this study, this is back in February of 2016, we set out to look at those key parts of the community, the natural heritage system, the open space system, as well as the existing land uses, residential, commercial, employment, mixed use, to see if we had to make any changes to accommodate this growth. So as I mentioned, the urban structure really helps to, and the urban structure that we're bringing forward is really helping to set the stage for a town-wide where and how to grow and how to manage growth and what to protect as well. It's important to remember that. And it's the basis for our official plan review. And another point too that we like to emphasize, it's the framework for making planning decisions, and that's an important role for this council, and the urban structure helps to support that. As I mentioned, study initiated in 2016, and this is the goal that we set out at the time to develop an urban structure which accommodates transition and change, but also reflects the identity of the town, that is environmentally sustainable and allows for protecting those important characteristics of the community, and also to provide for that infrastructure that we need here in a way that's fiscally sustainable. So early on in the review, we were looking at what we had to start our urban structure with, and some of you would be familiar with this idea that we have two official plans in the town of Oakville. We have the North Oakville secondary plans, and we have the Livable Oakville plan. And these are shown here. These are essentially the structural components of the town. This green area here is the North Oakville area, and these are the urban structure figures for that part of town, or schedules, as we like to say. And this is the Livable Oakville urban structure. So when we tried to establish a starting point, one thing that jumped out, for example, that's done very well in North Oakville, is that the natural heritage system is clearly identified. It's not so clearly identified in the Livable Oakville urban structure. And so this is what we were looking at. What do we have to work with? We have, so knitting it together, and the starting point for our study was the current urban structure for the town of Oakville. So here we are looking at major components of the community. We have the natural heritage system all the way through town. We have the provincial Greenbelt plan and the Parkway Belt West plan. We have the buff colored, or the yellow color, is the residential areas. We have our employment lands, our employment areas in the blue. We have our major commercial areas, Burloak, Dorval, Oakville Place, and Winston West. And so it's really, that's the starting point for discussion about what our urban structure means and how it's identified through the town. Another key component here, which is coming out of the Livable Oakville plan, is our growth management approach, which is really, you'd be familiar with the term of growth areas. So these are reflected here at these major nodes, and the notion of corridors, which is really coming from Livable Oakville and North Oakville. So this idea of accommodating intensification in nodes and corridors is what we're trying to highlight through this urban structure. Through the review, and this was a big part of the study, is what other elements could be added to the urban structure to elevate their profile and to continue to identify what's important for Oakville. And as we've said it around the study table and also in meetings such as this, when we look back 100 years, what are those key elements that will be defining our community? So we looked in terms of open space and natural areas, what could be added to the existing natural heritage system. So the proposed urban structure that I'll get to on the next slide highlights those additional open space, mostly public lands. Enhanced connectivity, this is really to strengthen our ideas around transportation within the community, and also to connect with the region and the adjacent municipalities. When we were completing our work, or I guess midstream, the region of Halton released their mobility management strategy, which really helped to crystallize for us those major transit routes, those major active routes, major transit nodes such as Bronte Go and Oakville Go and other locations. So that's reflected in the proposed urban structure. As I mentioned, nodes and corridors as the key locations to accommodate growth. And we're looking at some additional expanded nodes and corridors. And so I'll highlight those when I bring up the schedule of the urban structure, but it's looking at our existing growth areas, our existing corridors, and what areas might we also add, for example, Bronte Go, or take a second look at in terms of additional opportunities that could be found in some of those locations. The employment mixed-use corridor is an area defined for Spears Road and Cornwall Road right across town. And I'm going to get a little bit more into the detail of what's entailed there in terms of employment mixed use, but it's really looking at the evolving nature of employment uses in that corridor. And then elevating the importance of our cultural heritage resources in the town of Oakville, and specifically recognizing heritage conservation districts and cultural heritage landscapes as components of the urban structure. So when we layer on all of these elements, as we're referring to them, we begin to see what our proposed urban structure looks like. So again, you'll see the natural heritage system here in the green, the buff color for the residential areas, the nodes and corridors, which are in this purple color, if you will, are additional expanded nodes and corridors, the area around the new Oakville Hospital, Neagawa Urban Center. Two key nodes here, as I mentioned, that this is a town-wide basis for our official plan review. One of our major studies is to unite the North Oakville plans with the Livable Oakville plan, and key locations where we can look at connecting the north and the south are at Palermo Village and at the Uptown Core. These yellow lines are identifying, again, some of the connectivity that I was referring to, how to get across town, how to get connected into other parts of town and other neighboring municipalities. I guess another feature that I should mention around nodes and corridors is really the identification of a bit of a hierarchy for our growth areas. Under places to grow, Midtown Oakville is identified as an urban growth center, and it's an area that's going to accommodate significant amount of growth for the region and for the town. And here we have in Bronte Village and Kerr Village and downtown Oakville opportunities for intensification, but not on such a grand scale, more related to revitalization at a Main Street scale. So limited opportunities, but also important just from a community point of view. Another important piece to highlight is the importance of Lakeshore Road through the town as a scenic corridor. And then also we've identified Trafalgar Road between the GO station or Cornwall, in fact, to Lakeshore as a scenic corridor as well. And that's really recognizing its historic and heritage landscape type characteristics. A little bit more on transit, I suppose I should highlight. We have Bronte GO, which is an exciting new major transit station area that we're going to be looking at, and also some other transit areas identified for the Uptown area and also for Palermo. This connects nicely or links nicely with the land uses in the area, where we're looking at having a lot of people and a lot of transit in addition to the other modes of transportation in these areas. A little bit about this hatching. It's really it's a conceptual type of pattern, and we've applied it in these locations really to signify that these are areas for further study. We will get to an area study here, and we will delineate those boundaries, and we'll determine appropriate land uses and policies in those locations to accommodate future growth. So as I mentioned, we've been busy with bringing this project through its paces, if you will, in a public sense. And the first public view of the proposed urban structure was at the May 15th Livable Oakville Council Subcommittee meeting. I just wanted to highlight some revisions that have occurred based on input we've received through our study and also through staff review and reflection. I'm just going to use the mouse here just to go through them quickly. There's about, I think we have 7, and they are detailed in the staff report. Initially, we hadn't identified Wycroft Road as a transit priority corridor, so that's reflected here. Lands on the west side of 9th Line. A lot of these are favorite topics of participants in our process, so we're just highlighting those. There was some land in here that was incorrectly identified in the natural heritage system on previous versions. It's really, these lands are designated as employment uses. And then the 14 Mile Creek Valley had previously been shown as natural area, which it is in fact, but it underlies the designation of the Parkway Belt West Plan. And so here we are showing the Parkway Belt West Plan as the in effect policy there, and then if and when that land comes off, we have natural area underneath there for the local livable Oakville plan. There's some land at the northwest corner of 9th Line and Upper Middle Road that had previously been shown as residential area, and we have placed those, they're currently in the livable Oakville plan, they're identified as private open space, but they're publicly owned and they are under long-term lease to the town, similar to other parts of town where we have a similar arrangement. and we've put those lands into the parks, open space, cemeteries element of the urban structure, which is really to enhance that existing natural heritage system. Moving along to some lands. Oh, this is on the former Sawet Golf Course lands. Again, adjacent to the 14-mile valley, there's a green strip of land through this area that is in our natural area designation. So they're outside of the Parkway Belt, but that is really a council position that was taken through the Bronte Green hearing on those lands. And so that's just being clear about what the enhancements to the natural heritage system are there. And then since the May 15th subcommittee meeting, which took place in the afternoon of May 15th, the evening of May 15th, Council recognized 4 additional cultural heritage landscapes, significant cultural heritage landscapes. And so those have been added to this proposed urban structure, and they're in these locations here. Again, the details, the addresses are in the staff report. Finally, in conjunction with our approach to cultural heritage landscapes, there's a note here on the schedule that doesn't read very well, but there's language there formally using the term designation, which was too high a test for recognizing or protecting cultural heritage landscapes, and the recognized by council has replaced that language, and that is the to be consistent with the work coming out of our urban structure review, the consultant's report. Actually, we've received a couple other letters in this process, and some have come in today, and I just wanted to speak to a couple of a similar nature, and they're really talking about the lands along the Spears Road corridor. So these are letters submitted on behalf of some property owners in the area that we've identified as the mixed-use employment corridor. So just wanted to clarify for council some of the statements that were made in that letter, and hopefully to help with further dialogue on this matter. There's some excerpts taken from the draft official plan, and the first excerpt refers to the Spears Road, is a reference to the Spears Road corridor and how it's going to be a mix of non-traditional employment development. So we have, and the letter goes on to talk about the Spears Road corridor study, which is part of our official plan review. So just from our website, I just thought I'd highlight what we're aiming to achieve in that study. And it's really to determine an appropriate policy framework to guide future land uses and development, which will harmonize land use and transportation planning objectives. So that's a high-level goal for that study, and it's not, as referred to in parts of the letter, to try and get rid of any particular uses along that corridor. The second excerpt is from another part of the draft amendment that talks about decreased industrial and manufacturing growth, and that's really a reference to what's happening in Oakville town-wide. We're seeing a trend of increased office development. This is a great place to build offices, and part of that involves changing over from other employment uses. So it's really not we're not targeting industrial, we're merely acknowledging that that's a trend that's happening here town-wide. So hopefully that helps a little bit with some of that, and again, as we're receiving public input, we're grateful for that, and we'll continue to have these conversations. So just quickly now, thank you. Wrapping up on the policy directions, I won't get into the details of the draft amendments because they are attached to the report. It's pretty dry stuff, to be honest, but it's important stuff. But we don't need to go into it on the slides. When we talk about our urban structure and how we've shaped this framework, we keep referring to 3 levels, or 3 different pieces that work together. Really, it's protecting our natural heritage and our open space and our cultural heritage. It's maintaining the character of these residential areas, and it's directing growth to an identified system of nodes and corridors. So it's protecting, maintaining, and directing. That's sort of how we've tried to bring this together. And the amendments that are attached to the report accomplish 4 things, essentially. We're into the Livable Oakville Plan, we're putting in a new Section 3, which is the language that describes the urban structure. Another part of the amendment to the Livable Oakville Plan is to put in this new Schedule A1. And that's what I've been speaking to for the earlier part of this presentation. And this is really working together with the Section 3 to put a picture to the words to describe that urban structure. We're also adding into the livable Oakville plan in Part F, which is the implementation section, some criteria for how to protect and maintain our urban structure in the context of evaluating site-specific official plan amendments. So there's criteria that we're introducing there. For example, that changes to the urban structure can only occur through a municipal comprehensive review. And the types of studies that we'd be looking for in terms of the impact of that amendment on other parts of the urban structure and how it wouldn't be undermining, how it could not be undermining. And then the fourth amendment, there's actually two amendments in this fourth bullet, and that is to undertake some revisions to the North Oakville plans that align them with the livable Oakville plan. And it's essentially a conflict provision that says, read the two plans together for matters of urban structure, and if there's a conflict, then the North Oakville plans would prevail. So just wrapping up, as I mentioned, we've had some public engagement back from February of 2016. We've had 3 meetings on the study and the study findings and seeking input to the study with the Livable Oakville Subcommittee, not the CUB Committee, apologize for that. And then we also had a public advisory or a strategic advisory group that helped us out through some workshops. We held some public open houses in November, and most recently, May 30th, we had an afternoon and an evening public information meetings that had about 50 in attendance. And interestingly, the afternoon session was better attended than the evening session, and it's a type of meeting that we've been having lately, and we're really encouraged by that type of turnout. The afternoon session. Today is our statutory public meeting, and in fall 2017 we'll be bringing back the results of this work for a decision with council on the official plan amendments. The recommendation this evening is that we receive comments from the public with respect to these draft official plan amendments, and that notice of council's decision reflect how these comments were appropriately addressed. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bigger. I have a list of council questioners for you, and I want to ask my colleagues, would you like to hear from the public first or yourselves first? Public? I hear a groundswell for hearing from the public first. Madam Clerk, would you call the first listed delegation?
First listed delegation is Simon Fung from O'Connor McLeod Hanna.
Welcome, Mr. Fung. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, members of council. Members of council, your worship. My name is Simon Fung, and I represent a number of property owners on Spears Road. And if it would be easier for council, I do have a list that I can provide. It's not that extensive, but I do have a few on there. So if it's easier, I can pass that around. So for the record, and it's printed on your sheets in front of you, I represent All Color Paint Limited, Bot Construction Canada Limited, Bot Holdings Limited, Duet Developments, Oakville Stamping and Bending Limited, Tandit Management Inc., Vac Aero International Inc., Valley Creek Inc., Western Regency Construction Inc., and William and Janice Mueller. So each of these property owners have asked me to make submissions to council tonight with respect to this OPA. They're all concerned that the proposed changes to the urban structure may have a negative effect on the long-established businesses on Spears Road. To be more specific, as Mr. Bigger has said, the particular part of the proposed OPA that they're concerned about is the language found in the section regarding employment areas, which is the proposed section 3.7. It reads, and I quote, The employment mixed-use corridor along Spears Road and Cornwall Road is identified for its mix of non-traditional employment development. It is anticipated that development in the employment area shall continue to reflect an evolving macroeconomy based on decreased industrial and manufacturing growth and increased demand in office sector. The concern is with that wording, decreased industrial and manufacturing growth, and the town's desire to include it in the OP. All the property owners that I represent currently engage in a manufacturing or industrial use on Spears Road, which is an employment area, and so it's evident why they're concerned about the wording. My clients are trying to understand why the town would want to include something like this in the OP. I can see that the wording in that context can be interpreted in different ways. It can be read as town actively trying to push for decreased industrial and manufacturing use, or it can be read as Mr. Berger said, it's a recognition or observation made by the town with respect to the market trends. However, it's my submission that identifying it in the way the town has in the urban structure, in the OP, will be harmful to my clients. And that's because, whichever way the phrase can be interpreted, at the very least, the wording creates, right in the OP, a view of negativity surrounding those uses on Spears. It creates, if you want to call it, a negative policy foundation against manufacturing and industrial uses on Spears. Of course, the major concern is that this foundation will likely be the basis for future OPAs, for example, the one coming out of the Spears Road study, and also may manifest itself in zoning bylaws down the line. The concern is that this is simply the start of my clients' land uses being put at risk or being taken away. And I must say that it appears that the town is kind of condoning this. They have done nothing to defend industrial and manufacturing uses, nor are they concerned about whether these uses are lost on Spears Road. If you look at the list of clients that I represent here tonight, these are good, viable businesses that the town should be concerned about, should not be chasing away, and should be supporting rather than standing idle and watching them erode. More importantly, the town should definitely not be undermining these businesses with this kind of harmful wording in the OP. Just for some context, these businesses are like All Color Paints, which have been manufacturing on Spears for 50 years. Or they're like Bot Construction, who has multiple facilities on Spears Road that are industrial in nature. Many of these businesses have been there for decades, have made significant investment to be on Spears, and employ hundreds of people. As we know, mixed uses, including industrial and manufacturing, is the nature of Spears Road and has been that way for decades. With this urban structure, it seems like the town doesn't care about these important businesses that have thrived on Spears. And it seems, maybe passively, that they're trying to chase them away, which they can't really understand why. Now understand that urban structure elements are not intended to be land use designations. It's made abundantly clear in the second paragraph of the draft OPA, and my clients understand this as well. However, as I said before, they're concerned about what happens next, what happens at the next OPA, what happens in the zoning bylaw. Accordingly, my clients ask that council please reconsider what this proposed OPA could potentially do to the industrial, manufacturing, and related use on Spears Road. My clients are strong business owners that would hate to be pushed out of Oakville because of these changes. As such, it is their submission that manufacturing and industrial uses should be protected in the employment areas and on Spears Road, and that this negative wording against these uses be removed from the proposed urban structure. I thank council and your worship for their time, and subject to any questions, those are my submissions.
Thank you for your information. Questions, council? Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, is there another delegation?
We have no further listed delegations.
Are there other members of the public with information for council on these matters? I'll confine it to table then. I've got Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Adams, and Councillor O'Meara, and more are welcome. Thank you, Councillor Elder. Councillor Hutchins, you're up.
That was very...
Your introduction.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes, the active transportation, you're looking at the various corridors along Lakeshore, going east-west. There's the scenic corridor, Trafalgar, south of Cornwall, going down to the Lakeshore as a scenic corridor. Do you have that A1?
I'm trying to get it up.
Oh, okay.
The figure. Here we go. There.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And the north-south is up to Palermo from upper middle, I take it. How connected are these at the present time? I mean, are they a priority to do, or is this something that's in the future and we don't have any time?
In terms of their function as active transportation corridors?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably, if you want a scenic corridor, you want to connect it up earlier rather than later. So I'm looking for the priority and when these things will be the east-west and the north-south.
Right. So the active transportation master plan would set out those types of priorities and that sequencing in terms of development and investment over time. This is really just saying everything's important over the long term. And the details of what happens when it sits in another plan. So we can, if there are some specific areas of interest, we could get into that plan with you and show you those parts. Not right now. So this doesn't really establish a priority in terms of timing or sequencing. This urban structure, it talks about the long term, the future of all of these facilities.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank our staff for taking into consideration the discussion that we had regarding the lands at the northwest corner of Upper Middle and 9th Line. I think the park's open space designation would tend to make sense there. The only feedback I might have on the current proposed map that we have is it's almost impossible to tell the difference between the NHS and the park's open space cemeteries designations on the map because of the two greens. Can we amplify the greenness?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, the color separation and the color vibrancy is when we bring this mapping in-house into our system, we'll be sure that it reads properly and you can distinguish the colors.
Thank you very much. I have one other comment or feedback bit for you, which is we had a long discussion about the 3-quarter node at Trafalgar and Dundas, and I wondered if we could think more about how to describe what's meant by that so that we understand more intimately what's intended on those corners where they abut existing residential development.
So, sorry, you're looking for a little more explanation tonight on that?
No, later on.
Okay, so as we bring this forward,
as we move forward,
some clarity around that?
Yeah, I think it would be good to have a little bit more clarity on that. Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question on the GO station, but prior to that, I was just, to be quite honest, I was a little dismayed at some of the comments that were just made with regards to the staff report on the Spears Road businesses. Have we met with any of those businesses, or have they brought this information to us? Have we explained what you explained this evening to them prior to this?
We've had participants, or we've had representatives and the owners at some of our events, and we've had some discussion with them.
Because it sounds to me like I don't want to use the word grandfathering, we're looking at that, but we're also looking at just a snapshot in time of what's actually taken place. But from the language that I was hearing, it seems like there's a perception that maybe we're out doing something nefarious here, and I'm wondering if that's a miscommunication or where the breakdown is on that, because I'm not getting that from what you're saying and what our staff report's saying that, but clearly the language is the opposite with what we're hearing from the legal support. So are we going to be reaching out to these businesses to let them know, like, we're not trying to chase people away from Oakville? Is that part of the process going forward?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. It's not our intention to chase away important uses economically and for the community. And now that we have a letter in front of us, several letters, and property owners engaged, we can continue to have that conversation.
I appreciate that, because I know all these businesses, I know some of them very well, and I know that would never be our intention. So I was just a little troubled at the language used tonight. In terms of the Bronny GO station, I know on May 15th when we spoke that there was some stuff brought up about Metrolinx and how they may be reorientating the Bronny GO station. Is Metrolinx aware of where we are in this program with the urban structure review, or do we have anything further to report back on the timing of their plans or anything? Are they just going to jump in whenever they're ready, or are they aware of what we're going through right now?
So just a couple points through you, Mr. Chair. The Metrolinx was engaged through our Strategic Advisory Committee, so they have been part of this study process, and they will continue to be notified and engaged as we go forward, because they're part of our communications list. I don't know where they're at, and perhaps some of my colleagues here might have a bit more detail in terms of planning Metrolinx is planning for Bronte Go. I don't know where they're at in that process.
Well, I just would like, I'm thinking of a parallel issue going on at the region right now, and another government agency that did not take part in the planning process, and then in the 11th hour decided to come in with different plans in the planning process, and there wasn't really an opportunity to work together at the same time. So perhaps even a letter or something so that we have to point back at and say, this was the time when we were doing this and making these decisions and planning our urban structure and our core. So if you come in after the fact and decide you want to reorientate a bunch of things that are going to impact our transit and our traffic flows and congestion, I'd like to have that on the record at some point. So just to put that out there. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor, it's a novel proposal to tell the province anything of that nature, but we're gonna turn to the commissioner and then the manager, who both eager to help you with this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have ongoing meetings with Metrolinx. On their proposals as well as our proposals, as Mr. Bigger says, they were part of the strategic planning group that we looked at. But it is a bit of a timing issue. They are doing more short-term pieces. We're going to be coming back and looking, and they'll certainly be part of that working group and the boundaries of what the Bronte Go station will look like. So they need to move forward with some shorter-term projects in order to be able to best facilitate the station, and then we'll move forward with land uses around that station that would complement it, and we'll be doing that collectively.
Through your worship to Councillor O'Meara, I think a little bit of clarification I would like to make is, one, with respect to the Spears Road, we have initiated the Spears Road character study, and a report went to subcommittee last month, I believe, and we are now just starting to go out and meet with some of the people to talk about what their expectations are for that study and some of the property owners, and that has just begun, and we've had a lot of property owners that have reached out to us, and we're going to meet them on site and just talk a little bit more about the expectations and demonstrate the link with the work that's being currently done in the EA. With respect to the Bronte Go station, I think if you take it to the level of the urban structure, what this is recognizing is that the growth plan that was released in May does recognize the Bronte Go station as a major transit station area. So what that means is that we're required to plan for a minimum density of 150 people and jobs per hectare. So that's the intent. The reason it's a circle is because we're not really sure what the boundary will be. And as illustrated earlier today at the subcommittee in the work plan, we are going to have to do a more comprehensive study to figure out that boundary and the mix of uses moving forward.
Thank you for that. I understand all that. I just want to be able to, at some point when they come in and start messing everything around that we've spent time planning, to say, remember when we told you this was happening? I know I'm not expecting to get anywhere with it, but I think that's always good to have. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. If that's your idea of fun, have at it. Councillor Elger?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the proposed urban structure, which is a lot more meaningful when we look at it now, because you have a lot more areas where the creeks and everything are and the woodlots in here. Kirk, I think I heard you say 1 million will be coming. I think you meant to say, we already have a few here now, don't we, in Halton Region?
That's correct, through you, Mr. Chair. That'll be the total amount of residents.
Got it.
In Halton Region. So that would be in addition, including
jobs.
That's correct.
Residents and employment. Now, okay, so our official plan now will meet the 2031 forecast that we have in place?
The Livable Oakville plan currently conforms to the old growth plan.
Right.
And our current official plan review will bring it up to conformity with the 2041.
2041.
That's correct.
So the numbers for the 2031, and we don't have the numbers yet for the 2041, do we?
We know regionally what to expect, but that hasn't been allocated through the locals yet. And
right.
That'll come through the region's official plan
So
review.
the 2031 for Oakville, what is the number?
And
where are we today?
Well, this
ballpark.
So I don't have my Livable Oakville plan in front of me. It's right there. But the census was just released, and
are we around 190 population in ballpark?
193 is what I'm hearing
193,
here,
and
Mr.
we're going to
Chair.
what, isn't it 231 or something like that?
231, 255, I think, in the Little Oakville plan
255
by 2031.
by 2031.
Forecast. That's the 2031 number.
A number.
Yes.
Yes, because the other number, but at the region, they said that wouldn't be more residential houses, there'd be more people per house is what they said. So it wouldn't add more housing, but there would be more people with the A number, right?
I'll defer to Commissioner Clohessy on that one, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is a very confusing topic, I think, for the public to understand about the population numbers. The previous growth plan we conform to, and our population is the 255 at 2031. The province did an amendment to the growth plan, which introduced new population numbers for 2031 for the region as a whole, and a brand new number for 2041.
Right.
So our process right now in terms of our official plan review is to understand at a local level, at our town level, what it is, how we want to grow as we move forward, so that we can then best inform the region as the region starts their process in about 2018, 2019 on their official plan review. So the portion of the population that the town receives under the new amendment to the growth plan, so the new 2031 number and the 2041 number, will come through the regional review. So at this point in time, we don't know exactly what the population number would be under the new growth plan, because that is actually assigned by the region. What we have done in terms of all the work here is to try and demonstrate what we could accommodate and should be thinking about planning for, so we can maintain the character of the community that the town of Oakville wants going into the future.
Okay, it'll be good when we finally get the number. We're on target right now, though, for the 2031 currently, A?
Yep, we're planning for that type of growth right
Right.
now within all the policies that we have.
Okay.
And we're on target.
Okay. On page 120 of the report, and you actually, you had it up on a slide also, the town's urban structure protects natural heritage, open space, and cultural heritage, and maintains the character of residential areas. The word open space, should we kind of qualify that a little? Because I don't know whether we do protect natural heritage and all the open space.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, the term open space is used here really to focus on the publicly owned open space lands in the town of Oakville.
Yeah.
The study report gets into some of the details of that. But having said, so in that element that we're calling the parks and open space and cemeteries element, which is added onto the natural area system, we also have waterfront open space, which is it's a designation in the Livable Oakville plan applied to private lands and public lands along the waterfront. And that's really a signal that those are important to secure in the long term for public use through development. So there's a couple different types of open space reflected in this.
Yeah, and it'd be good if we can
public.
get that sorted out, because after we got burned with Saw Wet that was private open space, it kind of makes every word means a difference, I realize now, and anything, doesn't matter what, especially in plans, official plans, so. Okay, I look forward to more detailed information coming forward, and I thank you. But I do like this map has come a long way from the original map.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Asked and answered.
Councillor Chisholm.
Ditto.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. A number of my questions were asked and answered, but I do still have concern with respect to the lack of hatching on the Ward 5 portion of the Uptown Core. Maybe chalk it up to a sense of hatch envy on my part, but I am concerned that I heard the explanation at Livable Oakville, and I've given it some thought, and I remain concerned because if on this Ward 6 side, and the question's coming, on the Ward 6 side, it's hatched, so that would mean additional expanded nodes and corridors. But on the Ward 5 side, on the west side, it's not hatched, and yet the uptown core on my side of Trafalgar is still a work in progress. So I am concerned that it's not identified as such for future purposes. I'm not sure it's telegraphing the right information. So my question, my question is it possible to reconsider the designation of that particular quarter of that? And I know Councillor Adams had asked for more information when it comes back, but could you consider that for the future? Because I just don't want to be in that position where there's a misunderstanding going forward that what we have is the future, because that's always been promised that that's not the case.
So, to the planning director and the commissioner, we have Oliver Twist here asking for more, please. And really the question is your hashing suggesting that the uptown core is in some sense planned to its limit? I won't say finished, but planned to its limit, and you don't need to look at it for its additional capacity, as I think the councillor is asking you to do?
No, sorry, Your Worship, that's sort of the opposite of what I'm asking. So what I'm concerned about is it is not planned to its full capacity. That's been long acknowledged, that the current land uses are subject to change as time goes on. We heard today that part of one of the next studies, one of the next groups of studies is an uptown core study. So I'm concerned that we're not hashing this area for additional expanded nodes and corridors when we don't even have the final study in.
So is the nature of the outcome you desire is to see if more could be planned for the uptown core?
Yes, that's exactly. It's particularly along in the context of the commercial retail employment designation.
Okay, so we understand each other, and now let's see if staff can help us.
Through you to the councillor, Your Worship, we can in fact include the hatching on there. We understand your concern, councillor, and we'll make sure that we do that and reflect that work.
It's a much easier answer than my long soliloquy, so I thank you very much for that.
Hey, at least somebody got something here. All right, keep going.
I was referring to your joke about I wanted more, so I got my more.
All right. If there's no other questions from council, can I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Knoll, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and the staff recommendation is carried. That brings us now to item number 5, which is another information report. And to whom are we looking? Mr. Barrett, welcome back. You're up.
Thank you, Mayor Burden, members of council. This is the statutory public meeting related to an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision, and draft plan of condominium applications to permit the development of 20 townhouse units on a private condominium road. The report can be found on page 139 of tonight's agenda. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to obtain any public input related to this application. No recommendation on the application is proposed tonight. Staff will return in the future following comprehensive review of the application with a recommendation report. The subject lands are located at the southwest corner of Sovereign and East Street. The applicant is proposing to develop the site with a 20-unit townhouse development. All units are proposed to be accessed by an internal condominium road with one access from East Street, as shown on the site plan. As provided in the applicant's rendering, shown on the screen, this is the view from St. Anne's Court of the proposed townhouse development. And if I could direct you to the public street frontages being Sovereign and East Street, you'll notice that there are no individual driveways proposed along either street. All of the access to the proposed townhouse units would be internal from the proposed condominium road. The lands are located within the Bronte Village growth area, right on the edge, and they're designated as low-density residential in the in-force official plan. For background, concurrent with the subject development application, the town's official plan review is ongoing, which includes a review of policies that direct growth and change within Bronte Village. On January 16th of this year, town staff presented draft policy changes for Bronte Village to the Livable Oakville Council Subcommittee. Staff subsequently presented the draft policy changes to the public on March 1st of this year for further public comment and feedback. Amongst other policy changes, the lands circled in red, shown on the screen, are being considered to be redesignated from low-density residential to medium-density residential, which would permit the proposed townhouse built form. With respect to zoning, the lands are zoned RL8, which does not permit the proposed development. The applicant proposes to rezone the lands to site-specific RM1 zone to permit the 20 townhouse development. A public information meeting was held on May 10th of this year where 13 members of the public were in attendance. A complete analysis of the application will be undertaken and includes review of the listed matters on this slide, which have been identified to date from the public. And that includes integration and impact of the proposed development on adjoining properties, conformity with applicable policy, development on a private road, lotting pattern and proposed density of development, traffic, on-site parking, adequate turning movements and sight lines, tree preservation, urban design, and building setback. In addition, comments received at this public meeting will also be considered as part of the comprehensive review. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forth the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Council, again, we have quite a number of delegations on this item. This is item 5, and we have 5 for 5. Would you like to hear them before you ask your questions? Madam Clerk, would you call the delegations, please?
Our first delegation is Glenn Wellings, Wellings Planning and Consultant.
Welcome, Mr. Welling. Would you like to go first, or would you like to go last?
Actually, that's a good question, Your Worship. Perhaps I'll wrap it up at the end.
All right, okay. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Catherine Marshall.
Ms. Marshall, welcome.
Madam Clerk, I have some additional information, 12 copies of which. Is it possible to hand them out to the councillors? I have a presentation here, and I'm just wondering, do I forward the down button to bring up my slides?
I think we'll get technical assistance down here
That sounds great.
Just make sure that all works.
All you have to do is just give it a second. Is this your presentation here?
No.
No, it's not. Okay. And which one is yours?
It's called...
Catherine Marshall? Perfect. And so you're just going to hit the next button, and as you just continue, it'll just go. Okay?
Okay, Your Worship and councillors, I'm here today as a resident of a home nearby, but not particularly close to this site. But the reason I'm here tonight is because when I moved to Bronte 7 years ago, and I started walking my dog in the neighborhood, I came across the site that you're seeing not very well up there on the screen, which shows on the left a really nice house that is in the shadow of a hulking development, huge mass of density. And I thought to myself, you know, it's poor planning. How did this happen? Well, as I've learned over the many years and many blocks that I've walked throughout the larger neighborhood, this isn't an isolated situation, but it's probably the worst. And guess what? It's at the absolute opposite end of the block of the proposal that you're going to consider tonight. So already one end of Sovereign at Nelson, I think, is very badly compromised in terms of being a livable, single, low-density residential block. Now, I have done my best to take an example of a property that would be of the scale of the one that's proposed and superimposed it right beside the existing property immediately to the west of the proposal on Sovereign. So I'd have to say I probably squished down the little house a little too much, but you kind of get the idea. This is going to be, again, a hulking mass up against, you know, what feels like a low-density, livable home. In addition, the way that this proposal has been planned, right next to this particular low-density home, will actually be not one, but 2 rows of condominiums, townhouses, so that in the backyard of this home will have, you know, very similar type of balcony deck situation looking into that backyard. So I don't own that property. You might say, why do I care? But again, I'm so mystified as to why anybody would think that that was a good way of utilizing land in order to increase densities, that I felt I had to speak up. So I'd have to say that probably one of my biggest concerns is, can the center hold? If at either end of the block you have this disjointed, heavy mass of high height, medium density, with minimum setbacks, and then you have a middle area, and particularly, you know, if the situation is really untenable for the homeowner, well, what's going to happen? I mean, the most logical thing, and something new I learned tonight, was that, in fact, the whole street is being, you know, potentially going to be upgraded quite significantly to medium density. And if the medium density proposal that you're looking at, you know, is any indication of what would be brought forward as a precedent, well, that would be, you know, really incongruous between the south side of the street and the north side of the street, where, you know, a lot of families have moved in and really, you know, created a new urbanism feel in the greater Bronte Harbor area. So I really want to say that, you know, there are examples, and just down the street, further down Sovereign near Bronte Road, you have a situation where there is an existing townhouse complex that abuts single-family homes, and I'm showing you a picture of it. You know, the scale, the setbacks, they all feel, you know, reasonable, comfortable. And I just wonder, you know, why do we have to entertain a proposal that has just got so much mass lumped into such a small little patch of grass? Why is this important to me? Well, I mean, I would really hate to see the whole of South Sovereign go, you know, medium density, you know, really in a very massive way, not in a sensitive or a sensible way. But I think that the more important issue is that there are large pieces of property on Hickson Street. So I'm sandwiched between the two on Bellier. between Sovereign and Hickson. They're large properties on Hickson Street where redevelopment is now being contemplated. One of them is a set of old rundown apartment buildings that have caused the police and the local residents nothing but headaches. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with that piece of property. And yes, I'm looking at you, Ralph. And then farther down, the former St. Anne's school site is a concern to the whole area because it is also rumored to be going to be a proposed townhouse complex in front of you soon. So it's the precedent. It's one small piece of property. Could it be one large step for the community to allow such a dense development to be contemplated on property that today is zoned low density? So I've handed out one other piece of information. Last night, your intrepid reporter got in the car and started to drive around the larger Oakville to see if I could find information that would inform my comments tonight. And I found that we've got, as you well know, a master plan community well underway at Dorval and Lakeshore area. And you know, a master plan community allows your planning department to suggest what are best practices. And certainly there was only one example where in the same block there was condominium townhouses of a massive scale, fairly, you know, sharing a block with single family homes. And as you can see on that overhead schematic, looked like there was at least a 30-foot setback between the two. So I would hold that out to you as best practices when you're going to put something massive into, you know, single-family home area, that the setbacks have to allow, just as they do on the most westerly part of Sovereign, they have to allow some breathing room between the two very different property types. So in summary, I just want to say that I'm very opposed to the development proposal in front of you. And I certainly hope that, you know, among my comments and the comments of many other people here tonight, that you will hear that Bronte is asking for something better than has happened in the past.
So can I ask you if you had a chance to look at the staff report? In the report, you'll see a list of the issues staff have identified. That is to say, what I read that as the problems they see, or are all of your issues captured on the staff list?
Yes, they are, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next delegation, please, Madam Clerk.
Next delegation is Chris Little.
Mr. Little, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and councillors. The previous lady has, I think, put a very good number of concerns forward, and I would certainly share all of the ones that she has had. I haven't had an opportunity to read the staff report yet, but I'm pleased to hear that her issues are raised in that document, so I won't take any further of your time.
Thank you very much, sir. That's very kind of you. Next delegation, please.
Next delegation is Harry Shaw.
Mr. Shea, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Your Worship, I have a presentation. Thank you. And while we're teeing this up, I have to come clean. There are a couple of typos, so I'd like the opportunity to submit the formal presentation tomorrow.
We're very forgiving of typos, and you can certainly do that.
Yes.
And it's the BVRA
Yes,
one?
correct.
Okay.
I'll confess, we might have made a typo or two ourselves in our time.
I'm sorry, sir?
We're kindly about typos because we may have made one or two ourselves in our own time.
And if you want to go back, just hit the
Great, okay, great. Thank you for that. Your Worship, Town Councilors, tonight's presentation from the BVRA represents the comments and concerns from our membership. And it basically falls into four buckets: increased density, setbacks, traffic concerns, and loss of trees. So in this slide, we're trying to show the current zoning and the site proposal, the second bullet under current zoning should read 4 detached dwellings and 2 semi-detached dwellings. And obviously, we're highlighting the front and rear setbacks that are dramatically reduced. In terms of the intensification for the site, we go from 6 to 20 dwellings. This level of development, we believe, would be obstructive to the community in terms of scale, inadequate setbacks, construction equipment, and inadequate access for services to vehicular traffic. Nonconformance to the LOP. Increased dwellings from 6 to 20. But we want to focus on bullet 4. The Bronte Village Growth Review recommends a change from low to medium density. This has not been approved by council as of yet. The Bronte Village Growth Review includes Sovereign Street in the growth area as adjacent to the village. This area is noted to accommodate sensitivity or a sensitive transition from the village to the stable neighborhood. This level of development does not appear to be sustainable or sensitive as a transition from the village, increasing density fourfold. The LOP 24.2.1. I just want to focus council's attention on item G, which is providing a sensitive transition between the concentration, mix, and massing of uses and buildings within and adjacent to the village. Character of the surrounding area and adequate setback. This application reduces by 78% the front setback from 4.5 meters to 1.0 meters, a 75% reduction in rear setback from 6.0 meters to 1.5. While Sovereign Street is donated as a transition area, the precursor is sensitivity to and in keeping with the character and charm of the surrounding area. This proposal negatively impacts the character of the street and does not conform with the current mix of dwellings. More importantly, it poses a safety concern negotiating the areas with impaired sightlines as a result of the inadequate setback and imposing structure. Traffic and access. The site is only 0.4 hectares and does not appear to adequately accommodate 20 townhouses with on-site parking, access for services, and vehicular traffic. This proposal serves to impede access and increase traffic during and after construction, negotiating the area, creating a bottleneck to East Street and Lakeshore Road West. Tree preservation. This site will completely be cleared of mature trees, further impacting Oakville Street canopy and impairing the charm and character of the surrounding area to accommodate this high level of intensification. Recommendations. The BVRA supports sustainable development that lends to the charm and character of a stable neighborhoods in area with sensitive transition from the Bronte Village. In keeping with the current mix of dwellings in this area, semi-detached dwellings might be more appropriate and pose less risk in terms of safety for the community. The site is closely located to a primary school, and as such, children negotiate the area frequently. There's a confluence of seniors living nearby who regularly negotiate the corner of East Street and Lakeshore West. And finally, Sovereign Street is home to families who embrace the charm of Bronte, proximity to the village, and the lake without concern for safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information, Mr. Shea, and thank you to BVRA. So if I understood you to be saying that this would have major impact on the community, would I be hearing you correctly?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there other questions for Mr. Shea? Thank you, sir, for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Linda Sinelli.
Welcome, Ms. Sinelli. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town Councilors. Most of the comments that I have prepared have been addressed. The major concern for me is the fact that the proposed development is in the direct vicinity of a junior school, and the children are constantly walking to and from. During the construction period, I would be particularly concerned with the high traffic that would go from the development possibly through the residential area, because the access to Lakeshore has become so congested, particularly from about 3:30 in the afternoon till almost 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. I think that I would like to reiterate that the traffic concerns and the safety concerns for the public school children is of major.
All right, thank you very much for your information. Councillor O'Meara has a question for you. Ms.
Sorry,
Sinelli?
just a quick question. So if we were able to somehow mitigate the construction, during the construction, the safety concerns, be it fencing, even the bulk of work being done in the summer when the students aren't in school, would that alleviate a lot of your concerns in terms of the safety elements about the kids while the construction's going on?
Well, it would certainly help with the safety for the children, but I think ongoing, I mean, adding the density and adding more traffic to the area, and as a resident directly in that area, we notice now that because Lakeshore is becoming so congested, particularly in the mornings between 7:30 and 9 o'clock, and in the evenings between 30 and 5 o'clock, a lot of the traffic now is diverting itself from Lakeshore Road through the subdivisions. Certainly along Marine Drive now, we're getting more and more flow of traffic, and certainly going from East Street up along East Street and then across to pick up Rebecca. We're certainly seeing a lot more traffic coming there. So I think the more density that is being put into our residential areas, whether it's on the north side or the south side of Lakeshore, is certainly causing more concern for the safety of our children and for our seniors.
I got you. Thank you very much.
Sinelli, before you go.
It's okay. I rarely know whether I'm coming or going.
You've been coming and going here, and
I
I
have.
apologize. Did I hear you correctly to say, though, that you agreed with the comments that other residents have provided earlier? And I'm thinking of, in particular, the comments by Ms. Marshall, who talked about the massing and the height and basically the change to the character of the neighborhood. Was that also?
Well, yeah, I think that, and I think it's not just this proposed, but you know, I mean, certainly we're seeing in the last, and I've owned in Oakville, I've owned in Bronte for over 30 years, and you know, seeing the changes, and particularly in the last 10 years, where every piece of property that becomes available is always changed from a single resident or a very low density residential into concrete blocks, whether it's the Shores or whether it's Amica or any other of the proposed areas along there, including within the residential areas themselves. And I mean, I think it is just diverting from certainly the village look of Bronte and the heritage look of Bronte, and it's, you know, it's impacting the choices that people made to live in the Bronte area, people who have invested a lot of time and money in their homes, and the whole area is now looking like it's going to be a whole different look, and it's disappointing, because for seniors and for young families, where you have the proximity and the foot traffic that to the lake and the parks and the shopping, you know, the intensification of the density and the traffic is certainly causing hazards and safety issues for us.
Thank you very much for amplifying and answering my questions. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The last listed delegation is back to Mr. Glenn Wellings.
Mr. Welling, welcome back. Council's ready for your submissions.
Thank you, Your Worship, council members. Good evening. Yeah, a lot to think about with the comments, and we certainly took copious notes. First of all, Your Worship and councillors, we do have the owner, the architect, and the traffic consultant available if any questions arise from around this table. Would like to thank Mr. Barrett for his diligence in bringing this file forward. And my client is very excited about this project, less so than some of the residents we heard from. Significant work has gone into this design, into the proposed layout of the townhouses. Plenty of work to a point where floor plans have been developed. And as Mr. Barrett did note, this is in the Brawny Village growth area where some intensification is expected. We had initially, Your Worship, started out with 25 units. And following our pre-consultation with town staff, it was suggested that we reduce the number down to the current 20 units. Based on the density requirements that were permitted or are permitted by the current medium density designation under the official plan. The townhouses themselves will be freehold. However, they will be captured within a common element condominium. The common elements would include a private road, services, utilities, which would include visitor parking, the transformer, stormwater management facilities, as well as bike racks. In terms of the safety concerns that were raised by the past speaker, several driveways will be eliminated onto the public roads in favor of no driveways, with the exception of one access point to East Street. So to me, that's a bonus when you're talking public safety. The townhouses provide an attractive design from the public realm along the frontages of both Sovereign Street and East Street. The more utilitarian elements of the plan, as earlier mentioned, have been screened from the public realm. That would be the visitor parking, the transformer, the bike racks, parking, garages, are all screened from the public realm in order to provide a streetscape that's both attractive with the townhouse designs and, to me, a huge improvement to what's there today. We have confirmed with the region that garbage pickup will be provided. Curbside pickup will be provided to each individual unit, which also includes the internal townhouse units. To me, that is another bonus. The original concept does show a garbage pad that will be eliminated in favor of the curbside pickup. There was concern about this not being in line with livable Oakville in the official plan, which is absolutely not true. The official plan, Livable Oakville, does provide clear policy direction for the land south of Sovereign Street as having potential for redevelopment and or intensification. The proposed townhouse development satisfies the intent of this policy direction. I suspect that is the reason why town staff is looking at the potential of a medium density designation under the official plan review, because it's consistent with the policy direction provided today by Livable Oakville. Just to put the application into context, currently there's 6 properties that are affected by this application, containing 6 dwellings. 2 of the dwellings, one has 3 units and the other has 2 units, and the remaining 4 are single units. And so the net is not significant. The townhouses are ground-related product, which in my estimation were appropriate for both transition as well as a fit within the community. You have the commercial immediately south. You have semi-detached units to the west. I think Ms. Marshall mentioned a single detached. That's not correct. It is a semi-detached. And then you have the single detached dwellings north of Sovereign Street. So there is a mix of residential currently in the neighborhood as well as commercial. So to provide that transition between redevelopment of this property and what's surrounding it, it's a challenge. I do admit it. Your Worship and Councillors, we've undertaken several technical reports in support of the applications. These were filed with town staff and are currently under review. In terms of parking, parking is provided at a rate of 2 spaces per unit, plus an additional 5 spaces for visitor parking, which includes 1 accessible space. This exceeds the town parking standards. The traffic impact is negligible when you consider what's currently on the property as opposed to what's being proposed. And our transportation engineer is certainly happy to answer any questions if council does have questions regarding traffic matters. So Your Worship and Councillors, I'm really happy to answer any questions. We will continue to work with the residents, and if the residents want to sit down with us again, I'm happy to facilitate that and try and address any outstanding concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welling. Councillor Robinson has a question for you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you for being here this evening and braving yourself for the hard work that's ahead. How do you propose to get together with the staff and the people that live in the area that have already told you how they feel and do what needs to be done to make it better?
Yeah. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Robson, it's a good question, but I think it needs to be done. We're continuously working with town staff, but the residents, there's a little bit of misinformation when, for example, the gentleman that referred to the zoning bylaw in a reduction in the front yard from 4.5 meters to 1 meter. I'm not sure that gentleman understands that the front yard is actually East Street, and that's where the reduction is being proposed. And why 1 meter is so that building alignment aligns with the commercial immediately south. So there is some information I think we can share to better frame the application and have the public better understand the application. So, Councillor, probably in answer to your question, I may lean on you and Councillor O'Meara to help facilitate another meeting with the residents.
Well,
if that works.
I'm sure that would be fine with everybody and our appropriate staff as well. Now, do you remember why the previous owner of that land that you've acquired, are you the owner?
No, sir.
Okay,
I'm the planning consultant.
Why
sir.
the previous owner didn't develop it? He subsequently sold it to somebody else whom you were working for. Do you know why he didn't develop it?
I don't, sir. I've not worked in this property previous to this application.
Because it was previously bought and something was going to happen and then something didn't happen.
Okay.
Thanks for your offer to be cooperative, and we'll see how we can pull this together. Thanks, Your Worship.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much for coming today. 2 quick questions. The western side of the property, what sort of separation is going to be there? Are there going to be trees, shrubs, or is it just going to be a fencing? What sort of separation between on the property line will be there?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor O'Meara. Good question. It would be a combination. I fully expect a privacy fence would be erected, as well as some landscape treatment. So it will be a combination of both, and we're certainly happy to work with town staff on the best method of treatment.
So perhaps we could look at some sort of maybe taller trees or greenery to block out, or if there's any sort of angles or views. I know we've done that before, but would that be something your clients would be amenable to?
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. And then my other question, how tall are the buildings themselves?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor O'Meara, I may call up the architect. I do know we're working within the current height parameters of the zoning bylaw, but maybe I can have the architect explain the built form and how it works into the height. If
that would be great, because we have conversations all day long about stories and how they don't necessarily all mean the same height. So I think some clarification on that would be great. Thank you.
Just 1 second.
Okay.
He thought he was getting off the hook tonight.
I thought I was off the hook. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. How would I bring up the exterior rendering
Well, technical support will be right
Technical
down.
support. I think it was on one of the earlier, the original presentation.
Oh, you may be
Well,
looking for
it
the
doesn't show
staff
the whole-
picture
the whole
then,
thing.
are you?
It's so small. It might be better to do the other slide if you don't mind. There was a slide in the pre. Yeah, I know. Oh.
Is this your illustration, sir?
This is, yes. Unfortunately, it's, the cropping of it is not.
That's okay, I'm just interested.
But
in
I think
height,
I can explain the gist of it. If we can get this in focus.
Sir, we can zoom in and out and maybe even get some focus.
Yeah, just a little focus, I think I can take it from there. If I can.
Just
Oh, I could actually do
give
this.
the-
Oh, great.
Give the technical room a second or two here.
That's better.
Aha.
Hey, look at that, focus.
Perfect, thank you. My name is Giampiero Pugliese. I'm the principal of Audax, architect on the project. So specifically to answer the question regarding height, because I think it's actually very important. I think one of the images that were presented to you, I think gives a bit of a misleading characterization of the massing of the project, and I want to kind of explain our strategy. So the height from a very sort of basic standpoint is 12 meters, and that is within sort of the policy mandate of the medium density. So that was sort of our benchmark. Now, when you look at 12 meters, you say, okay, well, how does 12 meters work in terms of a transition from lakeshore, a commercial street, to a single-family residential? And what can we do to sort of make our project be that transition element? So if you look at the massing of the building, so this image is actually looking from St. Anne's towards the site. So this is the block that is along east. So what we've done is actually taken the 12-meter height to that limit, which effectively is our 3 stories. So these are 3-story townhouses. Now what we've done is we've shaped the buildings in such a way that to the street they appear as 2-story buildings, because we've brought the roof line down and have brought down the eave. Now this is a strategy that is very common in a lot of zoning bylaws in order to mitigate height. So very often they will allow height but restrict the height of the eave. And they do that generally in traditional building forms that have pitched roofs, eave lines, and masses of that sort. So by doing that, what the building does, it presents itself really as a 2-story building. So that image that you saw, and part of my inclination to kind of take this approach is actually recognizing that some of the townhouses that have been built in this vicinity are actually 3 stories and are boxy and don't exemplify the type of character that you might find in the neighborhood through the more traditional architecture. So I'll finish on this because I think it's important. We're looking to do a building that is of today, yet is rooted in a tradition of the past, and trying to find an architecture that's a hybrid between the two, that respects sort of ideas of built form and roof lines and pitched roofs and eaves, yet has a contemporary component to it. We are catering to empty nesters and young families. They're large homes, 3-bedroom plus dens, 2,000 square feet to 2,700 square feet. We're catering to the type of people that want to be in this neighborhood, that want to participate in the activity and the sort of the pedestrian activity of this great neighborhood. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's good to know that where the differences are, because as you mentioned, there are townhouses around that are flat roof 3 stories. Correct. And those are massive structures, and it's interesting to know that really it looks like a 2-story even though it pitches up to the 3rd. So I appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar.
How does that work? I'm looking here, that 3rd story looks like it should be a midget or you won't have much headroom.
It's so magic.
What are you doing?
So what we do, if you see this element here, you actually have a window So it's sort of like a reverse, it's a dormer, effectively. So we introduced dormers, and that is one of the bedrooms. We also have, in this little notch, is a skylight that brings light down into the ensuite. And then at the rear, the building changes slightly, so you'll see at the rear, the form is a little bit different, and it goes to, we're able to get windows to the rear. So it works in plan.
So does it kick out at the third story, kicks out then at the back?
At the back, slightly. But it's sort of, part of the whole mandate of the project is to really present a face to the street that is compatible with the sort of built form. And then behind, we are able to be a little bit more creative in terms of making the units these large, livable family units.
Well, where would the single detached house, where would it be in the scale here? If there was one right beside it, how much lower would it be?
Well, it depends how high it is.
A regular single detached.
2-story with a roof?
1-story.
Well, a 1-story it depends on the ceiling height again. I'm not trying to be sort of technical here, but the finished floor of our units are actually very close to grade. They're only 1 or 2 steps because the design that we've established, the main living area is on the quote-unquote second floor. So what happens if you look at the site plan, and I don't know if you guys, you'll have it in your booklet there, but effectively what we've done is oh, perfect, thank you. So what we've done, so as you come in, you have a two-car garage. The pedestrian entry is off of Sovereign or off of East. Now, the uses that are found on the ground floor are a den or a flexible room. You'll have an extra washroom, and you'll have your laundry room, your mechanical room. So those are sort of those spaces. And then you go up a set of stairs, and then you're on your main level. So that's where you have living, kitchen, dining with a rear terrace. So that's sort of how it works. So to your question about height. To your question about height, a 1-story, say with a 9-foot ceiling with a pitched roof, the ground floor would probably be somewhere around here, the eave would be somewhere around here, and the pitched peak would be somewhere around there. So it gives you a little bit of a sense. Yeah, no problem.
So are you going with 9-foot ceilings?
We have 9 foot and then 10 foot on the main level, and then 9 foot again on the upper level. Okay. Now the third floor, it is to be aware, it falls within the roof line, and has instances. It's a smaller footprint. So you'll find this as a typical, in many, even probably in Oakville, but in throughout the GTA. This type of built form in townhouses where you have 3 stories where the third story is within the roof line. So we'll have areas where you have the walls that move in, and you have spring points and roof lines that compress that third floor.
No, I get it, and I see how you gained a little bit by having the kick out, how you changed.
You get a little bit of the kick out at the back, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Lischina.
Just a quick follow-up. If the second floor is technically mostly the living area, does it affect any homes around it that you're now looking into their space?
So this is overlook and privacy is always first and foremost a concern for our purchasers and our project. So privacy is a two-way street. While where we want to preserve privacy for our units, we also don't want to preserve privacy for the adjacent units. So what we've done, if you look at the outdoor space, so this is the area. I don't know if you guys can see that, if I can zoom in. But we can provide more of this information later on. We basically have sort of a covered terrace. So it's partially covered, and then it's framed by sorry about that. It's a little bit blurry. But it's framed by a series of columns and a trellis. And the idea is that between every unit, we would have privacy screens. So the very end unit, towards the west, would have a similar privacy screen to provide that.
But the homes behind it or
Correct.
Around it, if they're in a higher level looking down into their backyard.
Well, the nice thing about the way the plan works, so I think I should point this out, is that the rear terraces only occur on these units, on this block, and on this block here. Okay, so At this point, you're actually a side yard condition with the side of the building, so you don't have a privacy and overlook. What we've done, so we've actually been very conscious of this. These units on this block basically have a driveway and a single-car garage, and then a backyard. So they're a little bit of a different sort of built form, what you might perceive as a more conventional, I guess, townhouse. So you don't have so the outdoor space for these units is actually at grade, and is private. So it's thought through, the privacy for our purchasers and the privacy for the adjacent.
Thank you, Councillor. I just have a question, if I might. And I'm glad you have this drawing up. I'm trying to picture what view a driver would have leaving this complex of pedestrians coming up East Street. How far down the sidewalk would a driver be able to see before pulling out onto the sidewalk?
At this point here, turning right?
Well, I don't
Or
care
turning
which way
left?
they turn, but turning right, let's say. Either direction. My concern is that pulling up, and I hope stopping before coming out.
Yes.
I'm not understanding how the pedestrians would be visible to the driver.
Well, I think this is probably best suited for our traffic consultant to sort of assess the sort of viability of this. But it has to do with the distance of the curb to the building and this turning radius, and then the relative distance of the building face to the curb of the street. And based on the analysis that has been done, we feel that that's a safe condition.
So my question was, how far down would the driver, how far down, if any, will the driver be able to see?
Well, I suppose it depends on how far out they are. Well, does that?
I'm going to call on our traffic consultant,
I
Your
think
Worship.
that's a good idea.
Before he buries himself here.
There you go.
He's partially correct. It would depend on how far out the pedestrian is crossing the driveway. It'll likely be a stop control condition for any vehicles exiting the driveway. So they would have to, of course, yield to pedestrians and traffic on East Street.
My question is how far, when you're stopped at the proper stop before pulling out, how far down the sidewalk, if at all, would you be able to see if you're the driver?
I can't tell on this plan where the sidewalk is, but the driver would be stopped. Stop bar is typically 1 meter back from the edge of the sidewalk.
I'll take that for it's too hard to answer. My next question, it really isn't for you, sir. Thank you very much for your help, though. I guess it's for Mr. Welling. I would be interested to know what would be the effect on your number of units if you cared to respect our preference against private roads. Would that have any impact on the number of units you could fit on this piece of land?
Yes, sir. Your Worship, it would.
Would you be able to tell me what the impact would be in numbers?
Well, I think, Your Worship, that the internal units would not work. Like, it would lead to a plan that's really inefficient without that private road.
So you wouldn't know the number?
But no, it's 20 less 7. So you're looking at 13. So.
All right. And similarly, if, at an intersection, we have a concern called a daylight triangle, which is the idea is to make it safe for pedestrians and drivers to see them coming and not hit them at all.
Yes, sir.
And my concern about this issue arises from the fact that years and years ago, before this group of citizens became the council, another development was approved where there's just no way to see any oncoming pedestrian, and you have to inch out and hope you don't hit somebody. And I was distressed when I discovered that, and I didn't want to be part of ever approving something like it. So that's why I've been trying to focus concern on that particular issue. Perhaps in your further conversations with staff, you can find a way to assuage my worry.
Yeah. Yeah, Your Worship, I do understand your concern. I've taken some notes on it and certainly something to follow up on. I think the rendering may be a little bit misleading on that, which has caused some concern.
I'd be delighted if there's no problem. I'm just trying to make sure there isn't.
Fair enough, sir.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, does that complete the delegations?
Yes, it does.
Are there other
Thank
members
you.
of the public with information for council on this matter? Well, thank you then. Councilor O'Meara? Councilor O'Meara moves receipt of the information gained. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. Now we come to a discussion item, which is a recommendation report, a zoning bylaw amendment for Ahmed Holdings. And if we give our attention to Trish Collingwood, the public can be edified and council, you can be refreshed. And away we go.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. The report can be found on page 153 of tonight's agenda. And the purpose of this report is to present staff's recommendation on the zoning bylaw amendment application proposed by Ahmed Holdings. As noted by my report, staff are recommending approval of the application. The property consists of 2 lots. 2358 8th line is the southern parcel, and block 116 Event Plan 20M706 is the northern parcel. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is a simple mapping change that would amend the zoning from the existing RL5 zone to an RL8 zone that is consistent with the subdivision that is built around the subject lands. The zoning change will facilitate the merging of the 2 parcels shown above and the future consent application to sever the parcels into 3 lots for the future development of 3 new single detached dwellings. The subject lands are located at the southwest corner of Ravine View Way and the 8th line intersection. The parcels have a total area of approximately 0.092 hectares with 24 meters of frontage on the 8th line and 36 meters on Ravine View Way. The portion of the lands adjacent to Ravine View Way is a remnant parcel created as a result of the registration of Plan 20M706 in 1998. The southern parcel existed prior to the development of the subdivision and was not a part of the registered plan. The applicant proposes to build 3 single detached dwellings with access from Ravine View Way. The dwellings will be subject to the RL8 general zoning provisions and regulations, and a site plan application will be required for each lot. A review of the site statistics identify that the lots and proposed dwellings are consistent with the surrounding detached dwellings. The subject lands are designated. There we go. The subject lands are designated low-density residential in the livable Oakville plan, and the following features of the proposal complies to livable Oakville. The proposed lot configuration and lot areas are compatible with the neighborhood character of the adjacent lands. The proposed dwellings are consistent with the RL8 parent zone regulations, ensuring that the proposed scale and massing of the future dwellings are compatible. The development setbacks and resulting spatial separation between adjacent buildings are generally in keeping with the neighborhood. The development represents a logical extension of the surrounding built form. The subject lands can be adequately serviced by the existing water and wastewater services.
Final grading, drainage, and surfacing matters will be addressed to the satisfaction of the applicable agencies prior to a building permit, and the subject lands will be served by public transit on 8th line. The proposed development is in keeping with policies that speak to compatibility and protecting the character of established neighborhoods. As mentioned earlier, the southerly parcel is zoned RL5, and the amendment, which is a mapping change, will zone 2358 8th line to RL8 to be in line with the property to the north and allow for the future development of the properties. I wanted to point out quickly that at the time of writing the staff report, I had not received any written correspondence on the site. Last week I did have an email come in from the neighbor directly across on Ravine View Way. He did attend the PIM, the public information meeting last year, and he wanted to express some concerns about the overgrowth of the grass and the weeds on the property that we have addressed with bylaw and will be taken up midweek this week. In conclusion, staff put forward the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration: that in accordance with the Planning Act, no further notice is determined to be necessary, that the zoning bylaw amendment application be approved, that bylaw 2017-040 be passed, and that the notice of Council's decision reflect that the comments from the public have been appropriately addressed. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collingwood. Are there any members of the public with information for council on this matter here tonight? I don't see any. I'll confine it to table. The ward councillors are next. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams?
I just have a point of clarification with our staff on this item. On page 161, there's a comment with respect to 8th line, and in the report it says the required right-of-way for the future road widening of 8th line has been shown on the submitted plans. We don't actually have a plan to widen 8th line. I think what's being referred to here is work on the sidewalk and trail area. Is that correct?
It is. It's the widening that is required is consistent with our official plan designations for the classification of the roadway, which was a minor arterial. So it's keeping it in line with what, if there were to be future plans for the roadway and working on the sidewalk or any type of active transportation, that can be accommodated.
Great. Thank you very much for clarifying that. The other issue that was raised, and I think is consistent with some of the other neighbors' thoughts on the matter, is really just trying to reduce the impact during construction, dirt trekking, driveway, backing into other people's driveways, that kind of thing. Can you describe for those who might be watching back home how we handle those particular issues?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this was raised at the public information meeting and is part of the email that I received last week. This is something that is part of the site plan process and building permits. The development inspection officers will be out on the site. We will flag this as an issue that residents are concerned about, and they will go out and ensure that mud tracking, timing of construction during the day, and any safety concerns are addressed.
Okay, thank you very much. At the appropriate time, I'm willing to move the motion, the recommendation by our staff. I think it'll help clean up the neighborhood and remove some of the unsightly problems that we've got on that corner.
The item is moved by the councillor, and Mr. Lambert has taken due note of more work for him. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Item number 7 is the recommendation report for the draft plan of condominium for Fernbrook Homes at 210 Rebecca and 118, 122, 128, and 136 Maurice. And if we return our attention to Mr. Barrett, the public can be Councillor Dunnick.
Sorry. Thank you, Your Worship. Unless there's anybody here from members of the public or members of council, I'd be pleased to move the item.
Are there members of the public with information for council on this item? Mr. Barrett, you're being stood down. I hope you didn't rehearse extensively.
Of course not, Mr. Mayor.
You knew your file cold. You didn't need to rehearse. All right, it's duly moved. All in favor? And it's carried. Item number 8, infill development. Now this, as you might be familiar, is a big concern for everybody, not just on council, but all over the town. And Mr. Lambert, I think you're up. You thought you were getting off or something.
There was some debate as to who was going to present this tonight.
So in theory, we're giving you sharper, stronger tools with which to give people relief?
That is the plan.
Thank you. If you could summarize that for the public at home, I'm sure many of them would be reassured.
I'm going to try to do that. So I do have my colleagues, I'm experiencing the same technical issue as others. Bear with me, I'm sure I will get through it. No. Infill, here we go. I do have my other colleagues here with me this evening. I'm Darnell Lambert, your Director of Development Engineering. I have my colleague Jim Barry, Director of Municipal Enforcement, as well as John Tudor, Director of Building Services. So we have the pleasure of one third time lucky, not happening.
We're going to call technical support for you here.
It's been a little weird. Oh, there you go. Your magic is wonderful. So Mayor Burton, members of council, the purpose of the report before you is to present staff recommendation on process and bylaw changes that are intended to assist with mitigating issues that arise from infill construction. Moving forward from here might be difficult. There we go. In August 2016, Council requested that staff review and report back on options that could mitigate negative impacts from infill development. In fact, we're going to take you through the phases of vacant home, through demolition, through new construction, because certainly infill issues are not just related to new construction. So, as I mentioned earlier, building, municipal engineering, development staff collaborated on this matter, and as well we sought input from a number of councillors here sitting around the table. Information was collected, analyzed, and resulted in 3 proposed areas for improvement: training of enforcement and inspection staff, communications to residents and builders, and some process and bylaw changes. Perhaps maybe some IT improvements as well. There we go. All right. I will get through this. That's okay. Infill construction is a very active segment of residential construction in Oakville, as we all know. Over the past 5 years, on average, 142 permits for homes have been issued annually. And for 2016, this number has risen to 200. The majority of these projects do not create issues. However, the ones that do can generate multiple concerns. Some of the issues include, as you well know, noise and dust, fencing, parking on my street and in and around the area, tree protection, damage to adjacent property, grading, trespassing, and the list does go on and on. The next series of slides will describe the transition phases of infill development, going from the vacant home through the demolition, through the new home construction, and the issues that may result in the concurrent and proposed process and bylaw changes that we're bringing forward here this evening. Well, let's see. Sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't. There we go.
All right, so just hit it once for that.
That's what I did. All right, the vacant house. Lovely picture here on the screen before you. Typically starts with the neighbors noticing there's a vacant home in the neighborhood. Boarded up windows, issues such as vandalism, people uptaking residents in this place that weren't desirable, long grass, just general building upkeep. So currently, what we have in our powers are our property standards bylaw. And we rely on that to deal with issues such as the property upkeep or restricting entry into the building. Staff are recommending, as highlighted in here in red, a bit of a change in passing a lot maintenance bylaw that takes some of the current issues that sit within our property standards bylaw and move them to a property maintenance bylaw. You may say, what's the difference, Mr. Lambert? And I'll say, well, the Property Standards Bylaw has its origin within the Building Code Act, and it has very set provisions as to when we issue orders, the length of time that people have to remedy those issues, somewhere around 19 days, if I recall. Moving certain issues like grass cutting into a lot maintenance bylaw allows the municipal inspector to set a more reasonable time period for remedying those issues. Cut your lawn grass and bring it into the right height, we can say that should be done within 3 days as opposed to waiting 19 days. So that is one of the biggest significance coming out of that change. Also, the bylaw proposes that repeat offenders would be charged an administrative fee. Of course, having staff go out expends time, which is an expense to the town. We are able to recover that through an administrative fee that could be applied for those repeat offenders. Click once, he says. Demolition. So we moved from the vacant home. Now you're getting the early indications that the property is going to move forward with yet further change. So demolition typically is that first step towards new construction works. Issues here: dust, noise, damage to adjacent property, security, health and safety issues, damage to the boulevard. We're all quite familiar with that. Some of the existing tools we have today. Building code tools. At the demolition stage, staff rely on the building code and the municipal bylaws. When the demolition permit is issued, a set of demolition guidelines are provided to the builder that addresses issues like noise, dust, permitted hours of operation, and enforcement of these issues are through the existing municipal bylaws. Proposed changes or improvements moving forward from here. Notice to the public. Staff are proposing that the time the permit is issued, a notification letter is set to adjacent property owners so that they have a heads up. Work is coming. The letter would advise the neighbors of the impending construction activity and the applicable bylaws that the contractor must follow. Contract information and links to the website would be provided, and that would provide information to the adjacent property owners, because it should reduce the number of inquiries we get. What's going on? Something's happening. A fence has gone up around the building. What does that mean? They can have that information ahead of time. We have an online mapping tool. If you've been to our website recently, there's a number of tools that you can go to click on to say what's happening around my neighborhood. Is there a building permit issued for the property next door that's doing some work? Is there a private tree permit been issued? Has there been a site alt or a pool permit? So they're able to go and I'll say self-serve themselves right now to say, does my neighbor have the permit to do the works they're doing? And of course, if they come up empty or not finding anything, that's when we'll take a phone call and say, we probably need to go to the site. Property standards is highlighted on here because one of the recommendations is that the property standards bylaw include a requirement for construction fencing. The bylaw would regulate the items such as the height, the material, the gate opening, etc. And having this regulation will result in more consistent application of construction fencing around infill development. Right now, if you do see it, it's more because the builder so chose to put it. This would now be a requirement around the site. Construction fencing is intended to shield the work and secure the site, which are common concerns for infill development, as we all know. Now we move to the house has now been demolished, but probably at the same time a permit application has been submitted to the town. And as the applicant prepares to move forward in that to that next phase, he or she will submit a building permit, typically a site alteration application, as well as tree removal permit requests if that's what they're seeking. And this is the time that the home is reviewed for building code compliance, zoning compliance, grading and drainage plans are reviewed through the site alteration process, and the tree removal protection is reviewed under the private tree bylaw. And of course, then once those permits are issued, the construction commences usually with the installation of tree hoarding and tree removal. That'll usually get you a phone call or two. And of course, the foundation excavation then proceeds. Issues that arise, I'm not sure this slide is complete. No. Issues that arise can fall under what I'll call 3 categories: compliance with the permit, compliance with the bylaws, and that last one, neighbor interactions. And of course, I highlighted them in here. You know, under the compliance with the permit is the tree protection hoarding in accordance with the plan, is the grading following the plan that was approved. Under the compliance with the bylaws, so that's not something spelled out in the permit or on the plan, but of course, dust, noise, parking, mud tracking, damage to the boulevard. And the other one that sometimes I get to help have discussions between neighbors is the damage to the adjacent properties and or trespassing that can happen, unfortunately. So what do we have for our tools today? We have the building code, we have the zoning bylaw, we have our noise and nuisance bylaws, and we have permit compliance. Those are matters that we can certainly follow up with. So for example, we usually get the call, you know, is the home built according to the plan? Is it within the setbacks that were set out on the plan, or perhaps the building is too high? So our process that we have today already addresses that issue. There's a requirement that the building department sets out that an as-built survey must be submitted to the town within 2 weeks after the foundation is poured to ensure compliance with the zoning setbacks, because that's a common question that occurs. But we are looking forward to changes. So again, lots maintenance bylaw shows up here, allows us again to now react to a site that's a little untidy and unsightly, and set them a prescribed timeline to which they can remedy that site. We have the improved private tree bylaw, which itself will also give notice to the residents that a permit has been submitted or it's been granted. There's the posting of the sign for the 5 days. And additionally, we've increased our complement within our Parks and Open Space Department as far as processing the permit, but also reacting to inquiries that do come up. Public notice. Again, much like we had mentioned earlier, under the demolition, when a demolition permit is issued, issuing notice to the neighborhood that a demolition permit has been issued and giving them a heads up. Same would apply here for the building permit issuance. Sometimes they go hand in hand, so we'll look at streamlining that notice that goes out so they don't get a number of notices going out. So where we see demolition following right suit with a building permit application and a new build, then we'll send that one notice out to say that the property is going through the transitions of demolition and a new build construction. And enhanced enforcement. So an inspection enforcement staff will be trained on the new processes and bylaws and result in more proactive enforcement. For example, if an inspector notices that the required construction fence is not being maintained, that inspector will caution the builder to correct the infraction and will follow up with our enforcement staff for further action. Good Neighbor's Guide. Here is one that we hope to get a lot of mileage out of. This guide is being developed and it will be on the website, but there's also a request to have it in a printed form so that we can hand it out to our residents. And it will answer the common questions like, should I allow the builder to access my property for their development works? What if the builder damages my property? And the new structure appears too close to the property line. What should I do, or what are the checks and balances in place? Providing answers to the commonly asked questions should result in a more informed resident. And I do see this tool also giving them some advice that if they do wish to give an adjoining developer access to their lands, there's a right way to do that and there's a wrong way to do that. I'm probably quite professed in the wrong way to do that because I've had to have a lot of discussions with a number of owners that, you know, it was nice that you're neighborly and you want to get along, but, you know, you hardly know each other at this point in time, and there's a right way to do it. So this guide will give that information to them. Contractor parking. As a means to control and manage contractor vehicle parking in infill developments, the town is introducing a temporary on-street parking permit for workers' vehicles to park near the construction site. The delicate balance will always be how much and how far will that go. Temporary permits will be issued where appropriate, because not every street can accommodate a level of parking that may be required, to allow a set number of vehicles to park in a specific location for a set amount of time. This approach will allow for improved enforcement through permit conditions rather than the town's general parking provisions, which, as we all know, generally allows a person to park on the street for up to a 3-hour period. And without a proper management tool in this particular circumstance, we're into the chase game, where a vehicle gets rolled ahead and it's a very difficult item to manage. So the intention here is to have a more controlled component for the parking for these developments. Expanded use of site plan or scoped site plan. I think we've all had this discussion before, and it's now time to move forward and to have that into play. So infill or redevelopment of residential properties where the new building is of a significant increase in size can be subject to a scoped site plan review, focusing on grading and drainage, tree impacts, and a little bit more. And let me explain. So there's also, following the update to the Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan, we'll be positioned to request tree planting to achieve tree canopy compliance for these sites as well. But the site plan process will also allow us to secure drainage easements on lands where it is necessary. And we had a bit of a discussion of that earlier today on 181 Burl Oak Drive. And then it puts those elements into the public control and allows us to exercise our rights over those features. And it will also allow us to register a site plan agreement on these properties to inform owners, both present and future, of their obligation to maintain approved elements on those lands, be they drainage structures or perhaps canopy requirements on those lands. Whoops, didn't mean to go ahead. Construction fencing, talked about it a bit earlier. So again, during the construction phase, to have fencing around the site while the excavation is opening, but the biggest win here is to improve site safety and shield the community from the process of construction. Yes, sometimes these sites are untidy, but there's a degree of respecting that construction does have that element to it. I've seen bad sites, and I've seen sites that I would say that is the typical for construction works. But the fence here is intended to better shield that from the adjoining neighbors who have to endure that for a specific period of time. Builders Liaison Group. So we established a builder liaison group that will meet on a regular basis, very similar to the developer liaison group that the town has running here. Builders that typically work in Oakville will be invited to meet with the town staff to discuss issues and challenges. The first meeting was held on May the 19th with approximately 25 builders in attendance, which I think is really good at this point in time. And at that meeting, the proposed process and bylaw changes that are in front of you here this evening were discussed with them. And we emphasized that the builder plays a significant role in improving how infill development unfolds. There are good infill builders, and there are ones that need to improve. And the intention of that builders liaison group is to have that open discussion and bring forward our issues there, because we can pass as many bylaws as we want, we can up our enforcement, but they have a very important part in this process. The place we all desire to get to, and I mean all collectively, council, staff, the community, is the completed house. It's the last phase of the transition, but it's not always the end of the issues, unfortunately. The following issues can appear: occupancy without approval, construction deficiencies, and a final plan acceptance. Our existing tools include the building code and, of course, following up on permit compliance. For issues related to construction deficiencies, the homeowner can rely on Tarion. At the completed house stage, neighboring issues and concerns tend to be minimal, as the home and property is usually at a finished state. This final stage, however, does bring about concerns from the builder and the owner this time when they seek final approval and release of their posted security. We have experienced cases where the property has been modified and is no longer in compliance with the approved plan. These issues tend to be resolved as there is a desire to have their securities returned. And that's fairly effective. The issue becomes challenging, however, when the property changes hands and a new owner is introduced in the process of deficiency resolution. The introduction of a site plan agreement in these cases will offer an improvement, as the document and the plans will be registered on title, promoting a prospective purchaser to seek compliance requests prior to the purchase, hopefully. Non-compliance of the site plan conditions can be enforced under the site plan agreement as well as under the lot maintenance bylaw. So next steps for us moving forward from here, if all gets approved this evening, is to complete and implement the Good Neighbors Guide. We were really hopeful to have one for you this evening so that we could pass it around, but it is still a work in progress. Training of the staff on the enhanced inspector's role. Again, when you go to the site, it's a more broader vision of the entire site. Implement the contractor parking, which was talked about. Implemented an expanded site plan control or approval. Enforce the lot maintenance bylaw and the provisions in the property standards bylaw, which we're looking forward to having approved this evening, if hopeful. And a continued dialogue and an ongoing relationship with builders through the builder liaison group. So that concludes my presentation this evening. I am sure you have questions.
Well, as a matter of fact, we do have a list, and I want to thank you for this. I know that I can't think of many things that have been more desired across town by residents, to judge by my role as Chief Complaints Officer of the corporation. So the first one up to bat is Councillor Hutchins. I beg your pardon? Are there any delegates on this one?
We don't have any, no.
We don't have any delegates, sir. Thank you. Are there members of the public with information for council on this? Sir, please come on up and introduce yourself and share your information.
Go ahead.
Oh, my.
My name is Art Hampson. I live at 165 Stevenson Road. Back in September, a person who lives on the other side of the world bought a house at 158 Stevenson. That person never moved in. The person has never taken care of their property. It's precluded me from selling my house this year. I have it listed with Dan Cooper, who's an excellent agent. It's impossible to sell the house because I've actually seen people walk up and point to the house across the street with the lawn that is 30 inches high. Now, I don't understand why a lawn can go from 8 inches, which is the height at which things are supposed to be dealt with, to 30 inches without the town and council members being able to take care of things. I did meet with Ralph over at my house, but right now it's too late for me. I'm going to have to take my house off the street until the lawn gets dealt with. Now, the issue is also, I understand from talking with Ralph and from taking a look at the documents here, is that once the lawn does get cut, then we have to wait for it to go back to 8 inches again before the matter will be addressed. And then it's up to us to report it, and I understand that. Once it gets to 8 inches, will I have any firm conviction that it will be dealt with within a 2, 3, 4 day period of time, rather than waiting it for it to get to 30 inches again? And I think one of the ways to probably try and remedy the situation a little bit is in this new bylaw that we're putting in. We're talking about putting in a fine of $100. That's no threat. That's no threat to anybody. I would propose that you look at a minimum of $1,000 or higher for the first infraction, $2,500 for the second, and let's ratchet it up to $5,000 for the third. Because what's going to happen here is members who have lots of money don't really care. Now, I'm going to ask council members here, if I can be so bold, by a raise of hands, how many people here have on their street an abandoned house? I'm shocked. And still nothing done? Or have the lawns been taken care of?
If you want me to answer, I'll tell you, bylaw have been involved in one of them. There's about 4 others I've got right now to take pictures of, but they did cut the grass, but it was a terrible, shoddy job to whoever did it. Because there's no trimming, like there's little picket fence and the grass is higher than the fence, just in a narrow area. So I hear what you're saying.
But isn't it the town who asks and gets the lawn cut? So the town got somebody who did a shoddy job?
I do believe the town got somebody who might have owned the house and they did the shoddy job.
I see, they did the shoddy job. Okay. Well, I hope when the town is responsible for it, that the town will do a good job, because it did cost me being able to sell my house this year. Now, there's a lot of houses on, so I'll pull it off, and I'll wait till next year, but hopefully, I'm not looking at a cow pasture again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hampson. Next, sir.
Hi, that was a perfect segue for me. I'm actually a real estate agent. Dan Cooper's great, so, but I'm with a different company. I'd rather not say the name just because I'm here on my own behalf.
Well, would you like to say your name?
It's Kim McKinney.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKinney.
Funny enough, before this meeting, and I didn't know this was on the agenda, I drove around Oakville, close to where my son goes to school, because I'm always by that neighborhood, and I took pictures, and I have them on my phone, of homes with long grass. And it's a pet peeve for me because, you know, when you're knocking on doors every day, I hear it day in and day out. I hear it from vendors. Why are we so nice to these buyers? And I'm not pinpointing where the buyers are from. Why are we talking $100 or $1,000? Like it's like texting and driving. Why we allow it? It's crazy. So I encourage you, and I will volunteer my time. If you want to know an owner's name of any house, if you want me to go and cut the lawn, I think we need to deal with this. And on all my listings, I would cut the lawn any day of the week.
Thank you very much for your information. For your, I hope, reassurance, there's a member of council who's famous for cutting other people's grass too. And you could probably tell who it is. Anyone else? Sir, come on up and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Your Worship, council members. My name's Don Harvey. I live at 154 Stevenson Road. Art Hampson is my neighbor across the street. The property we're concerned about, 158 Stevenson, is just immediately to the west of me. I pulled that from the lawn. You're laughing, but it's not funny. This is absolutely disgusting. I'm glad to hear this bylaw will make it so that action will be taken within 3 days. I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm hoping that's true. I called May 8th about this property. Called the Oakville Services number, spoke to a young lady. She gave me a reference number, said you'll be contacted by somebody within 1 to 4 days, and they'll advise you what's going to happen with the property. I'm still waiting for that call. Never received anything. A week later, on the 15th of May, a bylaw officer put a notice on the door of the home indicating he wanted to speak with the person in regards to the lawn. Of course, I knew that wasn't going to be answered because I spoke to the homeowner when she bought it last September, and she advised me in person that she was going back to China. I've never seen anybody in that house since then. So the notice went up. I called the phone number of that bylaw officer, left a message. Still haven't received any answer from that. So this is kind of frustrating. Now, when they mentioned tonight about this $100 fine, I'm just going to reiterate what everybody else has said. $100 fine on a house that is worth close to $1 million is an absolute joke. This lady has gone back to China. She is sheltering her money in our country. She doesn't even rent the place out. She could rent it out for about $3,000 a month. She doesn't. Do you think a $100 fine is going to influence her to cut that lawn? Absolutely not. If her house goes up even 1% a year, she's going to make close to $10,000 in equity in that home. A $100 fine is a spit in the bucket, folks. You can only get these people to respond if you can hit them in the pocketbook. And $100 is not going to do it. So I ask you to revisit the fine proposal, set up a system where there's increments to increase the fine until you get these people's attention. Please.
Thank you for the thoughts, and thank you for the gardening. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Roseanne Dolapena. I had my 86-year-old neighbor come to me because on Mary Street we had 3 vacant properties. So I phoned the town, and kudos to the bylaw officers. They were phoned back and they told me it was done, and it was done. But the way it was done was the grass was high too, and he cut it and he put a great big mound there with branches. It looked just as bad after cutting as before cutting. And just the comment on the $100 fine, that's nothing. It should be a steep fine. In the morning I go to QE Park. And after the incident with the 86-year-old neighbor, I started counting how many houses between 4th line and 3rd line were vacant lots with high grasses, and I think I counted 6 to 8, and 2 I couldn't record because I couldn't get the address. And I phoned the bylaw officer, and they responded, but just there's a lot of vacant properties where people are not maintaining the properties, and I want the town of Oakville to take a firm stand and be a leading example. If you leave your property vacant, why should other neighbors suffer? The fine should be steeper than $100. $1,000 sounds good to me.
Thank you very much for your information. Anyone else? I'll take it. Oh, yes, there is. Welcome, sir. Please introduce yourself and share your information.
My name is Ken Mann, Mayor Burton, Council. I came here for a bit of a different reason. I came here to congratulate you on the bylaw that you proposed to put on the books. And in my case, it's not for a vacant home, it's for homes that are occupied, but the owners cut the grass once a month, whether they have to or not. And that is a disgrace to any neighborhood. And I was thinking, after a year of the new bylaw, that you consider a photo radar and employ students, take a picture, cut the grass, on the tax bill goes the cost. Just a thought.
Thank you very much for the thought.
Thank you.
If there's no others, I have a question for our town solicitor. Can you advise council and the public around what limits there might be around setting fines? And can you speak to the suggestions that we heard from the residents about starting high and escalating?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just discussing that issue with the Commissioner. My advice and suggestion to Council is not to do a redraft on the floor of the Council meeting, but if Council is interested in passing the bylaw, that they do so tonight, and then we'd be happy to work with our colleagues in the other departments to bring back a further review of the appropriateness of the fines.
Thank you. I asked the question mindful of that episode we went through where the province told us that it had been so many years since fines had been permitted to be raised that they told us it was time to raise fines generally across the spectrum that we're allowed to levy. And there was guidance given by them about one of the things they said to us was that the fine at the time for parking in a handicap spot without authorization, that the fine was too low, and they gave us a top end And if I recall correctly, it was $400 or $450 or something like that. And this council takes very seriously that transgression. And I well remember that we duly enacted a $450, or whatever the maximum was, that they had sent us. You know, it can't be more than this. And we still had to send it back downtown for their approval. And back came a notice from them that said, oh no, that's too much. And that occasioned a letter back to them saying, well, then why did you tell us that 450 was the top end when you really meant something else? So council and I are concerned about what are our limits. We, as I think you can tell, we're in complete sympathy with the residents on this. In fact, the reason council has this bylaw in front of it is because council's been pushing for action on this score. So I think your advice is good. We should go ahead and pass the bylaw. I'm going to support it anyway. And but we will look to you to bring us back sharper teeth as fast as you can file them.
I'm happy to do that, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Now, I have two more, let me see now. Councillor Hutchins, you finish?
No, I didn't.
Need a motion to
start.
go past
So, Councillor Hutchins, as a price for going on, would you give us a motion to go past the hour?
Absolutely.
Can I ask for your vote on that? All in favor? That carries. Councillor Hutchins, you're up now.
Thank you very much. Darnell, thank you for a very clear explanation of what's happening. I too was very concerned about the $100 as the fine, and had some suggestions that it A, should be scaled up, and B, could we pull a permit if necessary for repeat offenders, so that it's scaled not only, if we have a builder, for instance, that does it once and continues, and then he comes back again, and we keep finding repeat on housing after housing lot that he's building, that's something that we should be able to do something with. I also had a question. We're going to be responding in 3 days. How is this going to impact the staff numbers and things? I mean, are we going to be able to handle being able to go out within 3 days to do the job?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple things. I just want to address the fine. The $100 isn't actually the fine. The $100 is actually just the administrative fee for receiving the order. The bylaw still has fines. It actually incorporates some different things. It also incorporates administrative penalties. So this is something that we've traditionally used in our licensing bylaws. And with the passing of Bill 68 just last week, I believe it was, and amendments to the Municipal Act, now we've incorporated administrative penalties into the lot maintenance bylaw. So that's a minimum of $300 fine that can go on top of the $100 administrative fee. And then beyond that, if we want to take them to court, then we get into the larger fines if we can get convictions through the court. And it's a bit of a domino effect, and you're never going to get the higher fine on a first offense, but the escalating process is actually built into this bylaw. The $100 fee is actually just, if we've had to come to your property, issue an order one time, you don't pay the $100 fee. Every time after that, just for having us come to your door, you pay a $100 fee, and that's just to cover the cost and time of the officer coming that far. And there are penalties that would be associated beyond that. So just hoping to address that. Now, with respect to the 3-day period, we're receiving the calls now as it is, so the officers are going out there and doing the work. This just means we're going to contract contractors that much quicker to get the work done. So there could be a delay in some cases. Again, 3 days would likely be for those repeat offenders. In all likelihood, we would give 5 days for a first offense to give that that operating period in case somebody is away or they can't get to that grass right away. But the actual increased workload, there wouldn't be an increased workload. It's really just trying to get it be more effective in the workload we have now.
Thank you. All right. I had another question. How do we collect the fine? Because I'm fully aware that as it goes up, it has to go to court. So is there a way we can build in a penalty system which doesn't involve going to the courts, but maybe, again, pulling the permit or doing something like that where we actually control what happens rather than having to go to court to get somebody else to enforce things.
And that's actually the beauty of this, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's actually the beauty of this bylaw, incorporating the administrative penalty process into this bylaw. We actually control that process. So the administrative fee is something that's collectible through taxes, as well as the administrative penalty that we would issue. So all of that works through our existing administrative penalty process that we see for parking tickets and for licensing now.
But with respect, $400 is nothing. I mean, $300 $100 administrative, and then another $300 is really nothing. I mean, we want to have some teeth put into this so that it makes people think about making sure that they have, if they leave the country, they have some method that people are going to keep the place looking tidy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, we can't make the penalty punitive in nature. The administrative penalty is just that, an administrative process, and we're restricted on how large we can make that penalty before it falls outside of our authority to manage. So if we want to go for those larger penalties, we still have to go through the court system.
Well, does it have to be cash, or, I mean, can it not be something else? I guess our town solicitor is going to come back and inform us what are the options we have along those sort of lines. Okay, I had one other question here. The public notice that we're going to be putting out, what are we going to be put on that public notice? I mean, do we publicize the time, amounts that on Saturdays from 7 to 7, after that they can't work? Or, I mean, do we go down to that level of detail? Because that's something that the public doesn't understand, that contractors can work on the weekend, not on Sunday, but on Saturdays.
Correct. So I think the notice going to the owner or the neighbors in the neighborhood is to say a permit has been issued to allow this activity to unfold. The information you're speaking of would be housed within that Good Neighbors Guide, which will say, for construction, infill development, they're able to work from 7 to 7. This is the way they're to control noise and dust from the site. This is the parking arrangement that could be in. So all that information would be in that Good Neighbors Guide. And I think it's very important to get that information out up front, because those are the questions we answer on a day-to-day basis.
I fully agree with you, but can we not just do it just the immediate neighbors, but extend it a bit further down the streets and across the way, so that because 2 houses down or 6 houses down, they are equally affected by the noise, and they have friends who are living next door, and they get complaints and so on. It escalates.
So the question then is, how far would that notice go? Right now we're looking at abutting neighbors, and perhaps a little bit further, because we know those issues go further. Again, the other tool that we have is anybody should be able to go onto the website and click and say, do they have a permit, and find all that information out, regardless whether they got notice. It seems to be more the immediate or in close proximity to properties that we would send that notice to.
I know you can assume that everybody has computers, but that's not necessarily the fact, okay? So my parents don't have computers, and they're not interested in it, but they would like to know.
So I think we had the request raised to do a booklet form, so that if there was the question, we have a booklet available to hand out. We do fully appreciate that not everybody has internet access, not everybody can go to the digital world today, so we've got that covered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the interest of time and the number of items left on the agenda, I just want to say you've probably never seen as many smiling faces up on this side of the table. And so, Mr. Lambert, Mr. Barry, Mr. Tudor, this is great stuff. Thanks for all the time. And Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to move it at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Councillor Chisholm.
With time restraints also, I'll hold off. I'll go offline with Darnell on a couple of my questions. I think they're just very, I don't want to get in the weeds, but they're detailed, and we don't want to waste any more of council's time on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, staff, for bringing this forward. And like the others, I'll be brief. There's no more waiting time, right? There's been 19 days up to now, but the passing of this bylaw means that you can go out right away and clean it up?
I think the intent here is to give a reasonable notice. Right now, the property standards bylaw because it's constrained by the provisions under the building code, 19 days would have to be afforded. The passing of this bylaw still requires us to do a reasonable period of time to cut the grass, and that's where the 3 to 5 days are being discussed here this evening.
Well,
So there's
do you
still
have,
the need to give notice.
I'm trying to get off the line here fast. Do you have the ability then to decide if it's going to be 3 or 5 days?
Yes, and I think what you heard through you, your worship, through Mr. Jim Barry, was on the first offense, there would be probably the 5 days, and then when we got into a repeat, we would scale that back.
So you're doing your best right now. It probably started yesterday or so on to get out there and get some of these done. I think I heard that being stated tonight.
Once the new bylaw comes into play, we will be operating under those new tools.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Council. The item is moved by Councillor Giddings. All those in favor?
Might as well have a recorded vote since we've passed a law on it.
Yeah, we've got all the time in the world. For those supporting Councillor Giddings' motion, please rise to be named by the chair. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Meara, and Mayor Burton. I declare the matter carried unanimously. I now ask your attention to item number 9. And Council, you've had the full details on this. I wonder if you're prepared to, Councillor Giddings is prepared to move it as presented.
I'm happy to move the staff recommendation further to our standing instructions, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favor? Any against? That is carried. That brings us to item number 10, and as I understand it, we have a presentation from our Director of Economic Development, Ms. Dorothy St. George, and I believe we have at least one registered delegation. And a little bit of time, and not a lot. Ms. St. George.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Good evening, members of council. The recommendation before you in the report is to receive the reports from PricewaterhouseCoopers and Watson Associates, and they are entitled respectively the Glen Abbey Land Use Economic Impact Study and the Fiscal Impact Assessment for the proposed redevelopment of Glen Abbey Golf Course. And there are a lot of facts and figures in those reports in the appendices with the cover report, and to make things easier for you, I've got 5 slides that are summarizing the details in those reports. The purpose of the study was to assess the contribution of the golf course operation to the community, and that's referred to in the reports as the current state assessment. The study also was to determine the economic impact of the proposed redevelopment by ClubLink, which is referred to as the potential future state assessment. The consultant for the project was PricewaterhouseCoopers, referred to as PwC, and included in the PwC study is an analysis completed by Watson and Associates that estimated the capital and operating costs of the proposed redevelopment, as well as anticipated revenues to the town. The current state assessment includes 3 scenarios, being the existing use of the golf course, the economic impact when the RBC Canadian Open is held at Glen Abbey, and the projected impact if a hotel were to be built on the site, which is a permitted use in the current planning permissions. The potential future state assessment reflects the proposed redevelopment of the golf course by ClubLink into a residential, retail, and office plan, including over 3,000 residential units and approximately 120,000 square feet of non-residential development. The methodology employed by PwC is detailed in Appendix A to the report before you. It includes the use of StatsCan input-output model, the estimation of direct, indirect, and induced impacts, as well as residential trends and costing. The capital and operating cost analysis completed by Watson and Associates assess the impact of the proposed development on services provided by the town and the resulting implications on capital and operating expenses. And it should be noted that the Watson analysis incorporates assumptions from the financial impact study that was completed by IBI for ClubLink, as well as the assessment assumptions from PwC. So there is a range provided for the overall estimated economic impact. So the findings of the overall report, if you look at the table on the left, this is the current state assessment of the existing golf course operations. You'll note the 3 scenarios. Existing operations is the second column. The third column is the existing golf course operations with the Canadian Open being hosted at Glen Abbey. And the fourth column is the existing Canadian Open and a hotel. So the findings indicate that the existing golf course operation provides a greater economic benefit, as the table indicates, with each increment. So if you look at the GDP impact, it goes from approximately $3 million with the existing golf course operations out to $26 million with the existing operations hosting the Open and having a hotel on site. Similarly, there's a move from 50 jobs with the existing course operation to 350 with the Open and a hotel on site. Tax revenue also increases with the increments. So if you look at the table on the right side, this is the potential future state assessment of the proposed redevelopment. And if you look at the last line under the town revenue, this is the range that shows that there would be estimated a deficit of $2.5 million to a surplus of $1 million. And you can attribute the difference in that range to the different assumptions that were used by PwC in the analysis done for the town, and the assumptions used by IBI in the work that they did for ClubLink. So that difference really is how they estimated and looked at the assessment values primarily of the residential homes. And the assessed value under the PwC scenario was almost twice the assessed value under the IBI study. With respect to the economic impacts of the proposed redevelopment, there is a one-time GDP impact of $503 million to $581 million. That's all the construction that would ensue over the build-out of the residential and non-residential development on the site. And I should note on page 229 of your agenda, there is a typo. The range that I've just mentioned of $503 million is shown as $503 to $428 million. And it should read as the table before you, $503 million to $581. The one-time benefits for the proposed redevelopment far outweigh the one-time benefits for the existing golf course operations, which really would reflect if you put a hotel on site, there would be one-time expenditures for the construction of the hotel. But the outcome is quite different with respect to annual impacts. The annual GDP output and spending impacts are lower in the redevelopment scenario than in the current golf course operations. And I'll go back to the table so you can see that. If you look at the annual impacts and the output on the left table of 5.3 million up to 44 million, if you compare that to the output annual impact on the redeveloped site of 3 million. Similarly, you'll see the same sort of difference, 3 million to 26 million for GDP impact under the current golf course operations and leading up to a hotel on the site. Contrast that with the GDP impact of 1.7 million on an annual basis for the redeveloped property. So the annual operating impact on the town is estimated to range from the deficit of 2.5 million under the IBI assessment that was completed for for Club Link. And it would range to a surplus of $1 million for PWC at full build-out. There's an overview of the site, and that completes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there questions, Council? Councillor Hutchins would like to move receipt of the information. We have a delegation, and he's still here. He hasn't given up. Councillor Stote, or former Councillor Stote. Sorry to re-promote you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'm here as a layperson. I'm not a planner and I'm not a lawyer, but I've read all of these reports and followed this proposal with interest for lots of reasons. And I'd like to just spend a few minutes to share some of the layperson's view of these reports and of some of the other information that's happened and conversations that I've had with many other people. We're a planned community, one of the first in the world, as you all know, laid out by William Chisholm, who designated land for residential, recreational, educational, spiritual, and medical uses and planned for the future. But we're not a change-averse community. Some of these long-standing land uses, our original high school, our original hospital, have all been repurposed in the changing public interest. You have a very significant decision about a property that's always been designated as open space, is currently used, consistent with that designation, as a golf course, and which the property owner wishes largely to repurpose for residential uses. It's obvious to everyone that Glen Abbey has become an integral part of Oakville's identity. While it was a golf course before, its current incarnation as a Jack Nicklaus designed course has been a significant boon to the community, raising the profile of Oakville worldwide, serving as the setting for moments of drama seen by millions and providing a spectacular amenity for the residents of the community who, regardless of whether they use it themselves, benefit from it in seen and unseen ways. I'd like to talk about some of those benefits in relation to the reports that were received tonight. If the golf course is closed, it'll be a loss to the community, a loss of an amenity, a blow to its prestige, a loss of one of the elements which makes today's Oakville, just so you know where I've landed. These documents are well researched and well written, but I have a couple of observations on them. First of all, it will not have surprised any of you that Club Link has not revealed the economic performance of Glen Abbey separately from their overall performance. The consultant has been forced to infer many things from these overall financial statements. I think it's likely that they have significantly underestimated the financial performance of Glen Abbey on a standalone basis for the owner. They suggest it's about 25% better than the average Club Link golf course. Glen Abbey charges significantly more than other Club Link courses for a round of golf, and it does so all the time. Many of the other courses must offer discounts to sell all their tee times, and they still don't. Glen Abbey is almost always fully booked. If you want to run a tournament at Glen Abbey, you'll have to book it a year in advance. That's not the case at any other Club Link course that I'm aware of. So not only is the rate on average much higher, but it sells more tee times. Today's rate at Glen Abbey, that's for Monday, was $265 per person. The rate at Hidden Lake, another Club Link course in Burlington, was $65 per person. I would guess their profits to be 4 or 5 times better than what the consultant suggests. I bring this up because one of the factors in your decision on the merits of the application will have to be what will happen if we hold on to the current zoning. For financial reasons, I think it's unlikely the owner or any subsequent owner would find a better use for the property within its current zoning than to continue to operate as a prestigious golf course and to continue to seek to host the Canadian Open Tournament as often as possible. I think the numbers speak for themselves, even in the consultant's report. On the issue of economic impact on the community as well, I think there are 2 other points worth mentioning. First of all, there will be a relative, of course, reduction in the value of the properties adjacent to Glen Abbey if this goes ahead, and thus their reduced share of the total town assessment will be affected. Houses on Golf View or Fairway Hills are obviously more valuable if they actually have a golf course next to them. Secondly, Glen Abbey makes it possible for Oakville businesses to attract prospective customers to view Oakville companies' facilities and attend business presentations because it's a desirable place to play golf. I'm not talking here about tourism and retail. I'm talking about people that do business to business. It's, for any golfer, the possibility of playing Glen Abbey is a big deal. It's worth arranging one's business schedule around the opportunity. At my 200-employee Oakville company, we brought prospective customers out for demonstrations of our product services, lured them here with the promise of a round at Glen Abbey. I'm sure we were not alone in this. We also ran tournaments at Glen Abbey to thank our customers for their loyalty, to reinforce it. Again, I know many other Oakville companies use Glen Abbey this way, and it contributes to Oakville's prosperity in ways the reports before you do not mention. Other golf courses would not have this impact. It might be difficult to quantify, but it's real and significant nonetheless. Another example comes from my experience as campaign chair and as a board member for the United Way. Every year, the United Way runs the Mayor's Invitational Golf Tournament at Glen Abbey. This tournament raises about $140,000 for the United Way. As anyone who's run a charity golf tournament can tell you, $50,000 is considered outstanding. $30,000 is good enough. The appeal of Glen Abbey to golfers, its prestige and mystique are why they are willing to pay $500 each to play in this tournament, and why it is always sold out. No other golf course in our region would have the same draw. These comments of mine only serve to reinforce the contents of the reports before you, which clearly indicate that the highest best use of this property from the town's perspective remains its current use. Further, I emphasize that I believe the current use would likely remain the best use for the owner unless the zoning is changed. Of course, there can be no guarantee of that short of buying it. I do not blame any property owner for trying to maximize the value of his or her property. However, this owner purchased the property in full awareness that the town has always intended it to remain private open space, regardless of any attempt to tax it otherwise, which was not based on anticipated or desired zoning change, but rather on what was the normal practice for golf courses at the time. The question before you is whether or not this proposal is in the public interest. It's likely obvious to you that the public has formed its view on this and does not believe it is in its interest. Nevertheless, you must balance all the facts and considerations and attempt to evaluate the merits of the application on its effect on the future development of Oakville. I think these reports give substantial support to the argument that this development would reduce Oakville's attractiveness and renown and overall prosperity, result in a tax increase for current and new residents, and disrupt its balance of land uses. I'm assured that Halton and Oakville have made provision for orderly population growth and for intensification that aligns with the province's objectives in the PPS. Areas currently so designated would have to be revisited to replace the open space this development would eliminate. Such open space as would remain within the Glen Abbey envelope would become a burden to the town for ongoing maintenance and would be somewhat landlocked and unlikely to be enjoyed by residents and tourists to anything like the extent that Glen Abbey currently is. It's difficult to imagine how the economic and land use benefits of Glen Abbey Golf Course could be replaced anywhere else in this community. It's not difficult to see that if the proposed development proceeds, the property owner will become, at least temporarily, richer, and Oakville will become poorer. Had the property owner purchased the land with residential zoning and used it as a golf course as an interim use to wait out the market, we would have no choice but to sadly applaud his or her business acumen. But that is not the current situation. ClubLink knew what they were buying, paid a price consistent with the zoning, argued strenuously for tax rates compatible with that value and won, and have no automatic right to a windfall planning gain. What they propose is not a needed and wanted facility that cannot be accommodated elsewhere. There are many provisions in the current excellent livable Oakville plan for the uses they propose. Their proposal unnecessarily disrupts the orderly planned growth of Oakville and brings with it lower benefits than the current use. Official plans and zoning are subject to application for change because someone might have a better idea, and we want to remain open to such proposals. They should not be changed when it is not a better idea, when it is not in the public interest, when it goes against the planned orderly growth of the community, and when it is solely in the interest of a property owner who purchased the land knowingly encumbered with long-standing zoning provisions. That's all I have to say. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to.
Thank you for your information, Mr. Stout. Councillor Lapworth, just call your attention to the clock, Council.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for your comments and detailed analysis. I would just like to add two things. That the Glen Abbey Golf Course is also home to a number of families of deer and foxes. And if it was to be developed, we would lose that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Stout. Council, Councillor Hutchins is moving receipt of the report. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is received. Now, we have, as I understand it, delegations on the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee matter. And Councillor Giddings?
I'd be happy to move items 11 and 13, Mr. Mayor.
Are there members of the public with information for council on these items? If not,
No, we're good.
11 is the Livable Oakville Official Plan Review Council Subcommittee minutes, and the 13 is the Notice of Intention to demolish Dunn Street. Duly moved. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So now we, Council, since we have a delegation on the Heritage Oakville matter, I would ask you to consider extending, waiving the bylaw first and then extending the meeting to accommodate this and the other matter that remains. Do I have a mover? Councillor Giddings is the mover. I need at least, if I remember the count, at least 9 votes. All those in favor? That does carry. Sorry, Councillor Robinson. Oh, and opposed, Councillor Robinson? Thank you. All right, so now we need a motion to continue past 10:30. Councillor Giddings again. All those in favor? And that carries this time. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you call the delegation, please?
The first delegation on item CE, which is 68 to 70 Navy Street, is Patricia Waitley.
Welcome. We look forward to your information. We apologize for the hour. And if we're going to hear you, we need you to move over to your left and address the microphone. Thank you very much.
Is it on? Yes, okay. This is very short. I live on Navy Street, and due to the recent removal of the bridge on Lakeshore Road, the jackhammering loosened cement in the basement wall of my home, which is almost 200 years old. And it is the oldest house in the Heritage District and backs onto 68 and 70 Navy Street. Therefore, I would like to request that the landscaping plan for 68 and 70 lifts the soil level to prevent water from both gardens running down against the old house and flooding my basement. That's it.
Seems a reasonable request. We'll see if we can accommodate that. Are there any questions for the Councillor Giddings?
For staff, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for your information. We'll proceed with staff now.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for coming out. Darnell, would this be in your, I understand that there's no concern with the build at 6870 Navy Street, but it's have to do, as you've talked earlier about drainage and water and everything else. Is this something that you'd be able to look into for the resident?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think if I heard that correctly, there was some inference of some damage as a result of the bridge construction?
I think the question was, could she be protected from unwanted runoff from the neighboring properties that are the subject of the application?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd be glad to follow up with the resident.
I'll put you in touch, Trish.
We're taking that for a yes. Madam Clerk, the next delegation? Welcome. Council looks forward to your information. As a single, as a solo or a duet, either way, no problem.
Both.
Thank you, everyone, for having us tonight, and thank you for passing the motion to hear our application out. I have a few brief opening remarks, and then my wife will add on as necessary. The matter before us tonight relates to the property that we recently purchased at 326 Reynolds Street, which is adjacent to the Oakville Hospital. And our property notably falls under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Now, part of why we actually bought into the neighborhood is the historic character of the houses. And to this end, we value and appreciate the work of the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee. And when we purchased the house, which we acknowledged was built in 1928, we expected a certain amount of work to maintain the property. Now, an issue for us in particular is during the winter, we've discovered that the house is exceptionally cold. And if this was a matter as simple of us running the furnace full tilt, we would gladly do that, but we've tried that and that doesn't work. So to address this problem, we submitted an application to replace the windows and have sought quotes from contractors used in the neighborhood previously. And key to the work was that the new window design would remain consistent with the original proportions, rhythms, and scale of what was there. Now, recently we were informed that our heritage permit application was recommended to be refused. And so what we'd like to better understand is the rationale for the recommendation, essentially given the fact that we felt that through our application that we were in good faith putting forth a proposal that was consistent with the Heritage Planning Council's guidelines.
So could I just ask, were your questions addressed at the Heritage Oakville Committee meeting? Were you there? Did you get a chance to ask those questions?
We haven't had, we've requested minutes for that, and we haven't heard.
I see. All right. And do you have more? If you want to finish, I'll then turn to staff to answer that and whatever else you have.
With respect to the details of the proposed project, or?
Sorry, I'm asking if you have more information for us. You said your wife was going to add
Sure,
something.
do you want to?
Sure. So throughout this process, we sought out 3 to 4 different quotes from different contractors. Some of them looking at replacing the window using new material, wood with aluminum clad on the outside, mainly just for our sake, for durability, and just to make sure from a maintenance standpoint that we're not taking down and painting the windows every 5 to 6 years, but making sure that it's sort of kept to the aesthetic of the existing windows. We also sought out a contractor that looked at restoration of the windows. I think one of our problems is that our main goal is really to increase the efficiency and to make sure that a draft isn't just coming through all our windows. You have 40 windows in the house, so you can imagine draft coming through an 88-year-old window is quite significant. And so the contractor that we spoke to said, you know, even if I restore the window as well as the storms, you're probably looking at a 20 to 30% increased efficiency. And he was very honest with us. That's not going to meet your goal. And I'm not sure that spending all that money and that time is going to be worthwhile for you. So really what we're hoping for is that our goals and your goals match, and that we can come up with some sort of compromise instead of just, you know, saying to deny the whole process and not really give us a good rationale for why that is. We completely understand that you want to keep with the aesthetic and make sure we restore as much as possible, but from now, all the storms need to be completely replaced because they're just to the point where they're not restorable. And in terms of the windows internally, we were told that maybe 5 to 10% need to be replaced. But again, he didn't do the full look. So, you know, I think we would appreciate, you know, your comments in terms of the application and why that was refused.
Okay, so we have staff teed up to answer your questions. I think maybe we should go there first, and you're up.
Thank you for your comments, through your worship. One option going forward would be to actually sit down and have a discussion, maybe with a few of the Heritage Oakville committee members, and defer this application at this time. And I'll defer to the commissioner.
Commissioner.
Just following up on Christian's comments was, there is a Heritage Oakville meeting on June 27th. It gives a short window of time for you to come in and speak to staff and try and sort out what is possible, to have Heritage Oakville provide some input in any potential revisions that were coming forward. And that gives us the opportunity to come back to Planning and Development Council on July 10th. There is, under the Heritage Planning Act, a deadline to deal with the application itself. It's a 90-day window, so we have actually until the end of July, but our last meeting is July 10th. So that may be an opportunity, so that there's an opportunity for a dialogue and perhaps a resolution. So the remedy would be to defer this to July 10th, and in the meantime, staff would contact the applicant to look at some revisions and potentially get back to Heritage Oakville.
So I'm satisfied with that, and I believe we've got a mover over here. But could I just ask staff to explain that the concern is more than aesthetics? Perhaps Kristen Flood would like to just mention that.
Certainly, Your Worship. So the Heritage Conservation District plan for that area, the Trafalgar Road area, it does speak specifically to windows, and several provisions were included in the staff report that talk about conserving original historical fabric and character-defining attributes, which windows are one of. So that's where that rationale came from.
Okay, so in respect of the time, I think you've had a very clear answer and an offer to work with you that I hope fits some kind of reasonable time frame for you. And is it Councillor Chisholm who's moving deferral? It's Councillor Duddick that's moving deferral. Well, I'm going to go with Councillor Chisholm as moving deferral to, as stated by the Commissioner. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everyone. Now, that leaves item C1, unless I've lost track of anything.
So did you approve all of the Heritage?
Oh, yes. No, we only deferred that, and now, Councillor Hutchins, you get to move the approval of all, receipt and approval of all the others. All those in favor? I need more hands. Oh, it does pass. Thank you, everyone. Now I think we're down to C1. Am I right?
Yes.
All right. So now, Council, we need a motion to retire into a session closed to the public. Councillor Duddick is giving me the motion, and I'm looking to the clerk for my language. So Councillor Duddick has moved that Council proceed into a session closed to the public because the subject matter being considered is litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or the local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Councillor Duddick has moved it. All those in favor? And that carries. Madam Clerk, would you set the room for a meeting closed to the public? And Council, do you want to take 2 minutes for a little bio break while we do that? I like to read the exact section for clarity. Litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. I now need a motion for a report that the verbal update provided in the closed session of council be received. Councillor Robinson, all those in favor, and that is carried. Now, I need a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Lapworth, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. I rise and report. The Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1 and 2, public hearing items 3, 4, and 5, discussion items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 13, advisory committee minutes items 11 and 12 as noted by the clerk, and I would request a mover and seconder for my report. Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Knoll, all those in favor? And the report is adopted. Is there new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature? I see none. I need a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws as revised. Councillor Elgar, Councillor Lischina, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and the bylaws are adopted. That completes our work. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we're adjourned.